Okay, it is a little bit after 9, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to the 25th Annual Tribal Environmental Summit. Thank you guys for joining us this morning. Our first session this morning is the Environmental Directors Panel Discussion, and our moderator this morning is Nancy John. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Nancy.
Thank you, Karen. The video is working or not?
Yes, we can see. And
okay. All right. I just want to, like Karen said, welcome everyone to the kickoff of this year's EPA Region 6 Tribal Environmental Summit. This is opportunities I think that we look forward to, and hopefully in the future we can come back together face to face. That's one thing I'm sure everyone would like to do. But for the time being, even though we have this in a virtual format that we are conducting the summit this year in, I still think we have a lot of excellent topics, presenters, people that have taken their time to be with us. And such as today, this morning, we have on our panel, we've got Cynthia Naha with the Piccaries Pueblo, Monty Matlock with the Pawnee Nation, Jennifer Homenick with the Fort Sill Apache Tribe, and Dino Chavarria of Santa Clara Pueblo. And I think what I will do is we have a list of questions that we're going to pose to each one on our panel. I think what we'll do is start off with, I'll ask the first question, and if our presenters would go ahead and kind of give us a summary or an introduction to what their current position is within their tribal government. And in addition to that, it maybe relate to us any personal education or professional experiences that may have prepared that individual for their career. I think I'll just go ahead and go in order as we have in the agenda in the booklet. And the first one up would be Cynthia Nahan. And Cynthia, if you would go ahead and join us. We've got to open the video and mute yourself.
Okay. Hi, good morning, Nancy, and good morning, everybody. I'm sure you all can see me. I'm sharing my video right now. But thank you. I wanted to reach out and real quick and just say thank you for this opportunity to be here this morning and to present to you all my experience in a role as an environmental director and natural resources director, and really what that means. So right now I am currently the director of the environmental program for the Piccaries Pueblo, which is a northern pueblo here in New Mexico. It's a really small program right now, so I'm kind of like thankful for that, getting back into the swing of things. As some of you know, I took like a 5-month break, or kind of like switched it up a bit, and did the worked for the South Central Climate Adaptation Science Center as their New Mexico Tribal Liaison, which was a good experience. Now I have a better understanding of how to integrate climate science into a lot of the adaptation work that we're doing within our Pueblo and tribal communities. And even more so now that EPA is actually working on their own climate adaptation plan. So I'm looking forward to what's to come there. Well, for myself, I guess my personal experience or education, I've never thought, well, I've always wanted to be a director when I started out in environmental program management in EPA Region 9, because I used to, of course, got my undergrad from Arizona State, and I am a tribal member from the Hopi tribe. So, grew up in northern Arizona, graduated from Hopi High School, and from there pretty much, got my AA degree at a little small college called Northern Pioneer College. Was able to do that and successfully get my bachelor's of science in 2003 from Arizona State in American Indian Studies. And at the time it was a new program, so I wasn't sure what that meant, and kind of still don't know what it means. But a lot of what I've learned through the courses that I took while I was at Arizona State was like federal Indian law and policy. We learned about the efforts for the United Nations draft. At the time, it was the Draft Declaration of Indigenous Human Rights, Indigenous Rights. And so through those opportunities of just the courses that were available, that were just starting out at that time for the American Indian Studies program, really, so to speak, helped give me a a bit, the knowledge that I needed as far as understanding federal Indian law and policy. And then, did a lot of grassroots organizing with Black Mesa Water Coalition, which was and still is a multi-youth led organization out of Northern Arizona, where we, basically as Hopi and Navajo youth came together to address our concerns about Peabody Coal Company and what it means to have a life of mine permit for your only source of water, which is the Navajo Aquifer, and the overextensive use of that for coal mining and making electricity for cities that, like LA, Las Vegas, and Phoenix, where we had a lot of Navajo and Hopi homes right next to the mine and right next to the power plants that didn't really have any access to that electricity. So kind of just raising awareness and becoming more familiar with a lot of the issues that are impacting, indigenous communities, tribes, and pueblos. So, for me, when I was offered a opportunity to work at the Intertribal Council of Arizona as their environmental programs manager, I went ahead and took that, and so to speak, that really set the stage or really gave me the background for beginning my career here in the tribal environmental professional world. So it was a really good opportunity that I was able to take part of, and I'm fortunate to be where I am today. So Nancy, I'll go ahead and stop there.
Thank you, Cynthia. Next up, Monty, and let me refresh the question here. It's in your current position right now, can you share with us, some of your responsibilities that you have within the Pawnee Nation and what personal, educational, or professional experiences prepared you for this type of work or your career?
Sure. Probably some things that stand out what I do. Of course, I'm director of Division of Natural Resources and Safety for the Pawnee Nation, and part of that is includes our environmental department of Environmental Conservation and Safety, to be exact. So we're a very small program. We're staffed of 3 people, and but we're multimedia. We no longer have an air program, but we do have a very good solid waste and a water quality program. We're working on developing a pesticide program, and we've completed the planning for our wetlands program, but we just don't have the funding to get it fully implemented this time. We're trying to figure out how to integrate both pesticides and a wetland program into our existing program, but their funding is quite limited and not consistent. So that's going to be a challenge to really peel off, try to implement those other programs. But I've been here at the Pawnee Nation since 1996, so I'm in my 27th year, I guess, 26, getting ready to go to 27. And it's, I thought I'd give a couple years and move on, but I really kind of fell in love with the type of job we do. We have very good, I'm sure, like you guys, very good job retention. We have very, very little turnover. And we realize the fruits of that. We have very few redundant setbacks. We have our errors, making mistakes, but we learn from them and move on. But we're not always having to go back and retrain staff. We try to hire people that are quite competent in their fields. We like I said, we're just a 3-man show here, 3-person show. Not to say we don't take on an individual from time to time on a special project or a intern or something like that. We do utilize those opportunities when they come across. But I actually got my start back in, I guess it was 1989, working for an environmental consulting company and as an environmental engineering firm, and that really exposed me to the hands-on in the diversity in dealing with the environmental field. I had the opportunity to actually work in and eventually manage a toxicity lab, dealing with particularly stormwater runoff and the pollutants associated with that. And from there, I dealt in some watershed management issues. And usually in an environmental consulting company, you're dealing with people that are already in trouble. They're looking at hefty fines and penalties. We're trying to figure out a way to get them back into compliance. And so that really was a good challenge and a great experience that really helped me in this job capacity, I think. And I know some of our other staff have gone through the same experiences that I've hired. But my undergraduate degree is in business administration management, which has been very, very beneficial for directing these programs. We don't get schmoozed by our finance staff at all. And we keep track of our own numbers and we manage our own fiscal responsibilities here. But I did go back and complete a environmental sciences degree. I started environmental engineering, but I was working full time. I couldn't keep up with the workload of that, so I had to drop it down to environmental sciences, which has been very, very beneficial at OSU, Oklahoma State University. But I don't know, it's we've had our challenges. We have a few court cases that we're working on, dealing with some issues. But hopefully, I mean, we get some good out of that and help us down the road. But that's about it.
Okay, thank you, Monty. Next, we have Jennifer Homenacki with the Fort Sill Apache Tribe, and Jennifer brings to us kind of a unique perspective in that she can view her program needs from a director's position as well as a tribal leader for her tribe. So, Jennifer, if you'd like to take over now.
Thank you, Nancy. Okay, can everybody hear me? Everybody, I'm in a hotel room, so I'm trying to speak loud enough. Okay, I am the environmental director. I've been with the Fort Sill Apache Tribe for about 12 years. I am a tribal member, so I kind of fell into the position. There was a spot open. I applied. My background was I was a legal assistant before that, and I studied at OU for economics. I got my degree there, so I went on to try this endeavor. I'm also an elected tribal official in my second term. We have 2-year terms. Let's see, I think that, that experience on being a tribal elected official has vastly opened my eyes to, all the things. It kind of puts the pieces of the puzzle together for me, thinking about the tribe and everything that's going on. It helps me develop who I was as a director as well. I started out, I didn't know anything about environmental, ITech, visiting other tribes, that type of stuff, EPA, project officers. That is also, what helped me become a better director. But as far as, that's pretty much it. I mean, it's also overwhelming sometimes, but it's great. I love it.
Well, thank you, Jennifer. Yeah, it sounds overwhelming. Sounds like you keep quite busy. And thank you. I think I shared experiences with you when I first started out with ITech and coming in and visiting there with chairwoman at the time. But those are experiences like that not only in the work that we do, but also that's what I miss from these conferences like the summit, being able to have the face-to-face interaction, the experiences that you can share, those that you can take back, those ideas and thoughts that you can may come up with that you can go and implement within your own programs. But thank you for sharing your background with us. Next, we've got Dino Chavarria with the Santa Clara Pueblo. Dino. If you would, could you describe your current position with within your Pueblo, and then what personal, educational, or professional experiences might have prepared you for the work that you do today?
Good morning, Nancy. Good morning, everyone. I'm glad to be part of this panel for the Tribal Summit this year. My current position here in the Pueblo is the the environmental director. We have a staff of 8 persons. I oversee the EPA grants, and also we have a DOE grant, which they call the LAP program, Los Alamos Pueblo Project. So we receive funding about half and half. It really works out to about maybe 9% of our funding from those 2 sources. So most of our staff actually are under the DOE side because we receive more funding there. And the program on that side is a little more involved and time demanding. So throughout in our office, we have an air program. And again, this is through DOE, not EPA. Groundwater and surface water. And under EPA, we have the Superfund 106 and 319 for multi-purpose, again, for the water program, in addition to GAP. So my responsibilities are managing those grants and overseeing staff who will conduct the field activities associated with the respective work plan. I would say my background, haven't has any specific work duties for that may have directly prepared me for this position. But I think of just the general work that I had done, especially when I first got out of school. This was in high school. For example, I was hired to pick up trash in our recreational area, which is about a maybe 10-mile stretch in the upper canyon area in the mountains. So that helped me appreciate the amount of trash that's developed and the ways people will be responsible or irresponsible for disposing of the trash. And then just other jobs that, where it requires a lot of time and effort, or you're on your feet all day. It just gets you ready for hard work. It disciplines you in a way, especially for a job like this. Well, you appreciate being able to sit down a lot, but at the same time, you're under constant deadlines and demands. So you need to make sure that you're able to address the work that's put for you. So that's I'd say the way my background has helped me in this position. I was initially hired as here in our department as a solid waste technician, and after a few years, got moved up to the assistant director, and then in 2014, I became the director. And I've been overseeing the department since then. And one thing that's helped us, I think, in our work, as Monty had mentioned, is we have very low turnover here in our office. I think our newest employee has been here for maybe 5 years or so. Yeah. I started the same year actually as Monty, the solid waste technician. So I've been here for a while as well. Still trying to get the hang of things.
Thank you, Dino. The next question that we're going to move on to is, a lot of times, within our office, our programs, when other tribes had new environmental managers or directors, we tried to assist and share information any way that we can, and help that transition, be a little bit easier. But what I'd like to ask each one of you is, what is one recommendation you would provide to any new director in being successful in their position as an environmental director? Cynthia, would you like to go ahead and take that one?
Yeah, I'll go ahead. And one of the things I used to tease my coworker about, just had a little humor, I guess, this morning. When I started as the environmental director, prior to being the director at Pickeries Pueblo, I was the natural resources director at the San Domingo Pueblo, where I managed 22 different federal funds. And just like Dino kind of mentioned, when you're in the position of director, you don't really do a whole lot, like a lot of the field work, you don't get a partake in, because you're constantly under different deadlines. And of course, the more funding you bring in is the better for better opportunities for the community you work for, the pueblo and the people and the land, most importantly. But it also increases your workload. It increases the amount of quarterly reports that you have to do. It increases even your ability to continue to go after additional funding or to find those resources that enable you to leverage a lot of the work that we do, because as we all know, a lot of the federal funding we get is non-recurring. We have programs that continuously give us out money like GAP, but we deal with the budget cuts and things like that. So for me, one of the things I used to tease Rex about, I used to always tell him, like when I started as the environmental director, I said, see, this is why I don't wear lotion. And I'd always tease, because you had to have tough skin, when you're in that position of director, and especially when you work for a tribe or your own tribe. We adhere to a tribal council, we adhere to our leadership. So it's imperative for us as directors and in that technical staff position to ensure that we're there, so to speak, at the forefront in a lot of these discussions, and that we're able to provide the information back to our leadership to make those sound decisions. So I think it's important, as a director, is definitely to familiarize yourself with all that goes on in and around your pueblo or your tribal community, because there's so much that goes on within the forestry world, within the water world, within, of course, solid waste, recycling, wastewater, drinking water. I could go on and on, especially now that we're talking about climate change, but I could go on and on about it. So, as a director, you wear many hats. So the best advice that I could give is definitely become familiar with, not only the grant funding you have on hand and your project officers and those federal agencies that, are providing the funding opportunities. Get to know who they are, because it really goes a long way to have those personal relationships that you build and develop over time, because then they start to see your own ability to be able to manage these programs, of course, in the way that they should be according to the federal regulations and whatnot, but also being able to see what is transpiring in your community as far as, bringing in these funding opportunities to do just that, build capacity. So you as the tribe, as the director, as the technical staff of that pueblo, of the leadership can, help to make sound decision when it comes to the protection of our environment and the natural resources, or when it comes to partnerships such as shared stewardship. How do we really, work in those concepts when we're, so to speak, binded by our reservation boundaries, and how does that really work, and what does it look like, and how do we integrally play a role in all these conversations, that are happening within the state at the county level and at the federal level. So I think it's just really important to just do your due diligence, your homework, familiarize yourself with your position and what you have as far as those federal funding, and what you can do ultimately to help build that capacity for your program. Right now at Pickery's Pueblo, we're a really small program. They have a GAP grant, the Clean Water Act 106, and a Clean Air Act 103B3 project grant. So, it's really small. And I really like that opportunity, because I myself, as a director, being in a position where I managed more than 3 different types of federal funding from different agencies, can see where and how to build that capacity for another community, another pueblo, another tribe, and what it really takes to not just do it, so to speak, from that perspective of increasing your opportunities for funding and leveraging, but also to build that staff capacity, and to ensure that as you're building staff capacity in your department capacity, that it's done in a way where you're providing not only external but internal training that will help ultimately achieve the goals that you have set out for your department. Nancy, I'll stop right there.
Thank you, Cynthia. I really appreciate that you took time to describe, a lot of the responsibilities and activities that you have to undertake, in your position there as a environmental director. I think a lot of times people may not realize what within the tribal governments, what the environmental director, how many hats they wear, and the different types of activities that they have to undertake in order to be successful. And truly, when we use that term capacity building a lot, especially within the GAP program, but truly building that capacity is within specific programs that you manage, that's truly really important. And Cynthia, thank you for sharing that. Monty, I'll ask you that question. What is one recommendation that you would provide to any new director, being successful in their position as an environmental director?
Well, I like to ditto what Cynthia and you both have indicated. I mean, it seems like we're a catch-all for any and every special project that comes across the president's desk. He passes it through us to give it a work over and see what we think, which I don't mind. It keeps us in the loop. But no, as a, if I was going to give a new director or a manager any recommendations, it's pretty grassroots. I would say, man, you got to know your environment. Know the environmental needs in what we're doing here. Know what resources are available. Identify your stakeholders. This is always evolving, always changing. But that's very critical. We hit the ground running back in '96 when we started. And, people's like, well, who are you guys? What are you doing? This has never been done before in an area. But one of the things we've done that was kind of was an icebreaker, we found common ground for our stakeholders, community stakeholders. And yeah, we have our federal partners, BIA, EPA, BLM, BOR, USDA. But we really need something, here at the community level, within the Pawnee Nation. And, so we was in a kind of a brainstorming sessions, and one of the needs that we had identified was outdoor classrooms. Let's establish an outdoor classroom as a grassroots effort. And we established a committee and started developing that. We had an old aquaculture facility at Sea Lake that has been abandoned, and working with NRCS and U.S. Fish and Wildlife and with AmeriCorps, we're able to get some funds and resources to start rebuilding that facility, bring it back to life, and converting some of those aquaculture ponds into micro, just a small water resource type education training ponds, designed in different depths and different features. And and we're still using it to today, but that was kind of an icebreaker. But from there, it established a working rapport with our community and our community, local stakeholders, and with state agencies. And we identify our problems and we try to identify the resources and address them. It's easier said than done. Because believe me, we have our challenges, but don't be intimidated by it. Take a multimedia approach. Don't have your blinders on. As a director, you got to look at all aspects, potential remedies. But I know it'd be tough because taking 20 some odd years experience and dumping on one individual all at once, that'd be tough. I'm not sure how, that wouldn't even be fair, but I don't know, it's like the ditto what Cynthia said. I mean, administrative side, it is, can be a challenge, but it's part of the job.
Well, thank you, Monty. And you're right, that is kind of a huge undertaking for environmental director to take. But at the same time, I think I'm pretty safe in saying that all of us share that same passion working within our tribal programs. So, and that's the great thing about within our programs, is that we can reach out and we share information, we share resources, we share the knowledge and experiences that we've had in the past. And thank you for sharing with us this morning things that you had to undertake. Jennifer, would you like to provide a recommendation to a new director so they can be successful in their new position?
I know we spoke already about knowing your jurisdiction, knowing what your concerns are, having a relationship with federal partners, but also is very important is seeking a relationship with your leadership. I have done that from the very beginning. And so they let me in on a lot of information that they had envisioned but then that was my opportunity to present my own input based off of jurisdiction questions, environmental questions. We did a lot of that. They included me in a lot of their meetings so that I was able to understand what they actually want and what direction, what other concerns that they have going on. Because we also have a unique situation with, we have a reservation in New Mexico, and we also have Oklahoma, and we also have federal trust lands in Arizona. So we are having a heck of a time managing all those jurisdictions, and making sure that everything's taken care of. But I would also recommend keep attending, continue education, anything that will help. I know that sometimes, you don't take away all of it, but you go to the next, you go to so many different classes and webinars, and, you're going to pick up something that you didn't know before, absolutely every time. And so I would just say, become close with your tribal leadership, communicate what you know, what could help them meet their goals, and also just watch out for deadlines, keep up with them as best you can, and that's it.
Nancy, I think you're on mute. No, you're still on mute. No, we still can't hear you. Let me see if I can unmute you on this end.
Did that work?
Yes.
Okay, now I lost my train of thought. No, I think what I was trying to say, Jennifer finished talking, was that it's very important. I have to agree in that those lines of communication, with tribal leadership, with the administration and management, regardless of whether you're a large tribe or a medium-sized or smaller tribe, that line of communication and those environmental priorities have got to be shared from the top level to those that are responsible for implementing those activities. So I'll move on to Dino. Dino, what is one recommendation that you would provide to the new director?
Just as other people have mentioned, just be ready for being your department to be called upon for a lot of aspects. Anything that someone considers environmental. We used to get called upon for dead dog. We still get called to this day for when they find syringes in remote areas or illegal dump sites. And after a while, it becomes, you're being called because you're responsive. It's not, it becomes less that, well, this is an environmental issue, but also because, that we try to drill into our mindset that we respond to a call, no matter what it is. Yeah, I think everyone knows the feeling, the irritation you can get when you call someplace or ask for a question, and you're always told, well, that's not my department, that's not my specialty. Basically, we try to help wherever we can, no matter what the issue is. So I would just tell people to be ready for that new director. That you can get called upon a lot. A lot of it's not going to pertain directly to your work plan or your program, but if you remember what your purpose is, what you're trying to do for the community, then it just makes the work a lot.
Okay, thank you, Dino. Another question that I think we've had to work on, especially with our GAP deliverables early on, when I personally say early on, we're talking about the early to mid 90s when GAP was first available to tribal programs. But even back then, the important activity was to establish your environmental priorities. What are your priorities? What is the tribe is faced with? What are they trying to deal with at the time? And then it evolves into other areas. You know, as that capacity building effort takes place, there's other areas that are identified that you have to place a focus on. And unfortunately, a lot of times there's no funding or very limited funding to help you address this. But that's one of the things I think, you know, importance has been paid on the ETAPs, getting those developed. But the question I have for the panel is, what are the primary environmental concerns that your tribal pueblo is facing at this time? Cynthia, would you like to take that one?
Yeah, so I just started with Pickeries Fall, and not just started, I've been there since December 6th. So been there for a good amount of time right now. And so of course learning, you know, familiarizing myself with the Pueblo and the issues. But one of the interesting things, and of course I always tell everybody this is where you can have job security, is management of solid waste. You know, that definitely is an environmental concern, especially properly managing it. But you know, we can have these state-of-the-art buildings that are built as far as, you know, what comes down from maybe IHS funding or capital outlay funding. But you know, infrastructure is one thing, but really putting, you know, financial feasibility into it is another thing. So I think that goes a long way into the challenges that, you know, a lot of tribal and public communities face when it comes to solid waste or sustainable solid waste management. Is, yeah, we're given funding, you know, of course through GAP to be able to do it, and then of course looking for leveraging of these different opportunities to do waste diversion, obtain recycling trailers and things like that. But I've noticed that one of the main concerns, of course, you know, is the management of solid waste. Pickeries is a really rural pueblo, so you know, of course, when you do full cost accounting for your management of your system, you know, it ends up being almost non-viable because of the fact that you're putting more into it than you are to manage it. And you know, we've experienced, because of COVID and the lack of staff, you know, issues in, you know, transporting and disposal of what is collected on site at the transfer station. So I know that continues to be a concern, and really looking at innovative ways to not just build the capacity, but of course, you know, as EPA, you know, tells us, you know, to build a sustainable solid waste program. I'm becoming more familiarized, of course, with the water quality program itself, and they do have water quality standards, and looking at what um, right now the basic parameters are, and really looking at what that baseline that has been built and going from there to further establish the program there. Of course, you know, with the wildfires that are burning, and this takes us into a whole other aspect with forestry. But again, then you start looking at, you know, once the wildfires come and you have burn scars, and then we have severe monsoonal events that, you know, a lot of the topsoil just ends up becoming sediment, you know, runoff, because there's nothing to stabilize the soil. So of course, you know, that's going to eventually impact the water quality of the streams that flow through the pueblo. So kind of keeping that in mind, you know, as we move forward into the future and dealing with not just the forest fires, but, you know, looking at our own options and opportunity for climate adaptation. I'm sure there's, you know, a lot of other primary concerns, you know, when it comes to water diversions and, you know, things of that nature, but I don't want to take up too much time and allow for some of the other directors to weigh in. Thanks, Nancy.
Thank you, Cynthia, for sharing that. Monty and I have known each other for many years, working together, and it's really been an honor to do so. But we also like to, there's a term, safety, that many people are familiar with, and Monty and I like to kind of point the finger at each other and lay blame. But it's an important issue that we have to deal with, you know, and it spans across all tribal governments, is the protection and the acknowledgement of the tribal sovereignty. But I'll pose this question to you, Monty, the same question is, what are the primary environmental concerns that the Pawnee Nation is facing at this time?
Well, that's a loaded question. 15 years ago, I think our priorities are quite different. 20 years ago when we first started, I mean, it was solid waste and pesticides, and of course, developing a water program, as you alluded to, Nancy, and tribes establishing their programs, typically like Cherokee Nation did, it raised a few political eyebrows and led to a midnight rider that is somewhat of a setback for Oklahoma tribes, I think. But forgetting all that, climate change, I've really changed things. We're still in a drought situation here in our area. And several years ago, when we were knee deep in this drought, we started having some vulnerability issues with the availability of both our surface water and our groundwater. Our surface water resources were obviously well below low flow conditions. We're barely maintaining any kind of surface flow. Our drinking water reservoirs are drying up, and we're not, two of them in our area that we're not, could not provide, we're no longer rendered a resource for drinking water for rural water districts. And of course that put more pressure on our groundwater resources. And we're dealing with some embedded water rights issues here too that have never been adjudicated here in Oklahoma. So there's a lot of uncertainty. But in the Pawnee Nation, this water district here, we have groundwater wells. We're not dependent upon surface water, unlike the rest of the community. But we're having so much, I guess, contraction in the clays that our water table is relatively shallow. When we did get rain, it allowed for surface water contamination to our groundwater, which we determined that through a dye test. Working with IHS, did a dye test and determined that we're under surface water influence because we all of a sudden started getting bacteria in our water, which we never had before. We always chlorinated, but that was an issue that something that changed. And we're trying to address that change, identify and address it. And we have, working with EPA and IHS both, we're able to get some funding and work over these wells and create more retention time for a nation. But in the beginning with solid waste and pesticides, but after start seeing more climate issues associated with climate rainfall, and it's mostly drought, it's the water availability, what are our legal challenges? We have water theft issues. We have never had water theft issues. Who would have thunk that people would be stealing water? But at the time we had a oil and gas exploration and production boom, and everybody's scrambling for water resources. We had helicopters flying around, with the same the buckets, drop buckets they have that they use for fires. We're collecting water out of every pond they can find or every surface water body they can find without permission. Is taking it and taking it to where and putting in tanks where they're doing these drilling operations. And we get phone calls from the county. Hey, is there a fire going on? We got a farmer complaining that someone's pulling water out of the pond. Heck, we even have people put pumps and run the lines. Actually damming up Black Bear Creek, for example, taking a backhoe or a track hoe and 404 violation, damming up segments of the stream to catch as much water as they can, putting a pump in and putting that water to a drill site without permit and without authorization. And we work Water Resources Board on that. But if there's a permit and you have permit violation, you got administrative resolve. But if you just take it without permit, that's theft. And it should be no opportunity for administrative resolve. It should be, it's a crime. And but we're working with Water Resources Board to start penalizing, because we had, we're talking about dozens of these operations going on like this in around our area, and it was certainly impacting us. But luckily the rains hit, so we got some relief on that. But it's still a challenge, and we're trying to figure out how can we keep that from occurring again. You know, how do we protect our water rights? How do we, you know, we can't even get the rights to protect the quality of our water, let alone, you know, the quantity of it. And, you know, those are our challenges right now, our priorities. It comes from the safety issues. Thanks for bringing it up, Nancy.
Well, thank you, Monty. You know, those are very critical occurrences that are taking place. And those are just examples too of some of the type of activities that have to be addressed by a tribal government. And unfortunately, that has to take place. But Jennifer, let me ask you. I heard you mention that you have land base that's here within Oklahoma, New Mexico, and I believe you said Arizona, so that's a couple of EPA regions. What is the primary environmental concern that your tribe is facing at this time?
Yeah, and because of those multiple jurisdiction areas, you know, some of our recent concerns right now are, you know, related to the geographical distance between the properties, making our monitoring difficult. We do air monitoring across, you know, in New Mexico and in Oklahoma, so we're kind of, you know, we're a 3-man crew as well. It's me, Monty Scamahorn, and Blake Harjo. And so we, you know, it's challenging to kind of balance that plus all of our other duties. Let's see, we're having obstacles in land transactions, you know, jurisdiction, safety, limits on what we can, how we can improve our environment, like the lack of codes and enforcement mechanisms. And that's something that we plan on working on to get more, so that we can we are able to, you know, enforce solid waste codes and stuff like that. But yeah, I would say that the main, you know, is the distance. You know, it's hard to we have a lot of stuff going on the border. We're 50 miles north of the Mexico and New Mexico border. So there's a lot of border activity. Steering committees I'm on, to kind of just keep track of everything that's going on around there. And, you know, that's all I have for now.
Okay, thank you. Dino, let me ask you, as with the others, what are your primary environmental concerns that your pueblo is facing at this time?
I think the impacts from climate change can't be overstated, and particularly the impacts on water, water quality, water quantity, and also air quality, of course. Those are the big ones that the entire area right now is facing because of the fires that are taking place in the Sangre de Cristos and in the Jemez Mountains. We know that based on the effects of the previous fires, the 2011 Cerro Grande and Los Conchas fires that took place, that we don't see recovery as expected, and you see the loss of particular species of trees and vegetation, and even animals. Los Alamos is documenting the loss of specific species of birds after the fire. And they say this is something that hasn't been observed post-fire, and they're all attributing this to climate change impact. So water, of course, is a big thing. We have a very robust water quality program because of the importance of water to the community, even though our actual quantity is very small, especially compared to other areas. The drought has really impacted the area because of the lack of precipitation and snow accumulation. So our runoff is very small now. And of course, the area still is very highly agricultural. Many people still plant and irrigate. And there's always the concern how long the water will last to make sure that you have a adequate crop. And a lot of these crops that they grow are important for cultural and traditional purposes, in addition to some of the vegetation and animals that are in these areas being impacted by fires. Hopefully that not just the programs, but the whole region is going to take a proactive stance on this. And even now with the fires going on, we do have these monsoon events that Cynthia had mentioned. There's going to be some dramatic flows into these canyons. We know Cochiti Canyon is burning now, so they will be impacted once again. So hopefully even EPA too, the region, will be looking into this and trying to assist them to recover from these fire effects.
Okay, thank you, Dino. As we hear a lot of the descriptions of these different types of either hindrance, obstacle, challenge that we're faced, I think once we break from this session later on, it should cause pause to think, about what many, if not all, of our tribal environmental programs are having to face. But the good part about it is we've got a lot of good people that are working within these programs that have a passion for working within their tribal programs. So to me personally, that's the positive outlook on things. Well, another question, I had a few to pick from, and in looking at our time frame and where we're at, I think this might be one that will probably take us through the end of our session. But Cynthia, I'd like to ask you, what are some of your future plans or goals for the Pueblo that you're working with now to address their tribal environmental needs or their concerns?
Thanks, Nancy. One of the things is definitely building capacity for the department. Unfortunately, for Pickery's Pueblo and their environment department, they have experienced turnover. And I think Dino might have mentioned it earlier about just the turnover that we experience within our tribal community or our tribes and our tribal programs. That oftentimes, it does create a burden on the tribe itself, especially as the grant manager over these federal funds. So one of my goals is definitely to build capacity for the department, and that means hiring staff, restructuring how the department was set up so that as we build that capacity, or as that capacity is being built, so is that retention. And I think that's really important. And one of the things I value about this morning's session is because I don't think we all necessarily plan to be a director. I know for myself, when I started out in Region 9 and going through the programs I went through, or the tribes that I worked with, because I worked with a couple in Arizona and a couple in California. So just knowing that, at that level of directorship and being able to have that trust of your leadership to sit in these meetings, I think is very important, because again, it establishes your presence as who you are in that technical capacity on behalf of your sovereign nation and your sovereign tribe. So I think it's important really to look at, for myself, the structure of the department and how I could really reestablish and work to increase the knowledge and understanding of programmatic management, because I know that's where oftentimes a lot of our programs and our tribes fall short, is that nobody wants to do quarterly reporting, nobody wants to do this, because it is a lot of work on that administrative side, but just as much as it is important to do the field work and to begin to build your database for whatever challenge and issue you're facing, that you want to, sort of speak, hold EPA and others accountable as far as that trust responsibility, then I think it's important to really understand that programmatic management side. So I know for me, those are really some of the main concerns that right now, but as we delve into the future, Pickery's Pueblo has water quality standards. So what does that mean to the Pueblo, and making sure that we're continuing to build the capacity of their Clean Water Act 106 program, from the basic fundamental to intermediate to a mature program, as stated in the outline in the guidebook, as well as building that capacity for GAP, and not just looking at it from that perspective of building a sustainable solid waste program, but looking at how it could be beneficial to underground storage tanks, because they just have a new travel plaza that is up and running, ensure that, the water quality for this, for surface water is, up to the parameters and metrics, so to speak, that the Pueblo has set in their standards, and holding where we can others accountable. And just most importantly, really safeguarding and protecting the natural resources of the Pueblo and their community. I think is one of the most important things, and really looking at how, again, to build those partnerships to be able to do the work that we do, because, we can't do it alone. And I think with just the systemic issues, the chronic issues of drought that we faced here in the Southwest, and more specifically to New Mexico, and a lot of the issues that are transpiring with wildfires, really just, I feel, increases the awareness that is happening to our environment, that is happening to our natural resources, especially when we're overconsumptive with water, overconsumptive with forestry project, overconsumptive just in the products we buy on a day-to-day basis. Because at the end of the day, when you no longer need that item, where is it going to go? It's going to go into your trash bin, to the transfer station, to the landfill. Will it break down? Who knows? So again, I think really capacity for myself, for the department, is looking at it on a holistic perspective. We do have 2 BIA water rights and water resources 638 contracts that we just got. I'm looking into the tribal wildlife grant to potentially look at a tribal wildlife assessment, also looking at the BIA tribal climate resiliency program funding, so we can begin to do climate adaptation planning and be inclusive of those impacts that we know that happen on a day-to-day basis. As far as drought's concerned, what happens if we have 2-degree increase in temperature and things like that. So really looking at where I can build that capacity, where I can leverage those resources, and of course always applying for federal funds. Thanks, Nancy.
Thank you, Cynthia. Monty, let me ask you that. What are some of your future plans or goals for the Pawnee Nation to address their tribal environmental needs?
Well, again, that's a loaded question. We establish our goals on a regular basis, especially through the ETIP and stuff like that, but processes like that. But we're just trying to make sure that we have we do everything we can do to protect these resources, natural resources, environmental, provide for protection of human health and environment. But we need to make sure that we have good, strong protective statutes and good, strong networking capacity, working with our stakeholders. That's the only way things are going to get done. Certainly we, try to maintain a strong, capacity. That's an ongoing process, to effectively protect these resources. But, we have, and some of that has came about, we're involved in 3 lawsuits. I'm not going to go in detail on them. I can't. But, we have one through Department of Interior with Department of Interior, simply because Department of Interior is adamant on utilizing these antiquated NEPA review. Well, it wasn't NEPA back in the day. Oil and gas permitting processes for exploration and production on Indian land, on federal lands. And it was causing us harm. It's causing our citizens harm. It's causing us harm. It's damaging our resources. Our statutes couldn't, we exhausted the ability of our statutes. So next thing is go to federal court. That's what we did. And working now with the Secretary of Interior to address some of those issues. I mean, we're talking about these statutes were established in the 30s. And a lot, there's been a lot of technological changes in oil and gas production now, but these statutes were antiquated, and these permits for drill, application permits for drill, everything's still based on these antiquated policies and regulations. So we're working on getting those updated. But that's outside my wheelhouse. And the same, we do have litigation with EPA on how the safety was rolled out. And we're, hopefully we'll make some headway on that and get that resolved. It has been resolved. We went through more effective consultation, which were denied before. And no ifs, ands, or buts about it. We have a lawsuit, litigation against oil and gas companies associated with the earthquake that we incurred here a few years ago that caused us great monetary damage and plus injured some people. So you can't be afraid to use the courthouse. That's what it's for. It at least brings your parties together to try to get it resolved. doesn't mean you have to dislike them. Heck, we like our oil and gas companies, but they're continuing business as usual and under state guidance. And it led to, you know, years of earthquakes, which they're still occurring. And so we had to hold someone liable for it. You know, it's a, don't be afraid to use the courts, but you gotta have the capacity to do that. And we're fortunate enough to have a legal team, that can address these issues, and hopefully, we'll address some of these ongoing issues so we don't have to deal with these, identify them as legacy issues 20 years down the road. We put a stop to that, but that's all I have to say about that.
Okay, thank you, Monty. Jennifer, what are some of the Fort Sill Apache's future plans or goals to address tribal environmental needs or concerns?
I did mention earlier that the establishment of tribal codes, beginning with solid waste, to help enable us to govern the jurisdiction. We also want to broaden our air quality monitoring to establish a data profile for the various areas of tribal properties. We want to be able to monitor for more, can't even think of the word, but we want to monitor more areas in New Mexico and Oklahoma. But in order to do that, we need to build capacity beyond where we are now. We need increased staff. We need additional programs, especially, working with tribal youth, try to, gain their interest, there's a lot of things that we're planning in the future to include a lot of tribal youth. That way, whether they can come in as an intern, or we can use them under a different grant that we have. But we plan on utilizing more federal grants with Forest Service, Fish and Wildlife, all the BIA different grants, the climate change, the water resource management. And we do have current projects out there submitted for all those different areas, and we're just going to see how it goes. And hopefully we'll have some increased funding and are able to accomplish a lot of the things that we want to do right now. So
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. Dino, can you share with us what some of your future plans or goals for the Santa Clara Pueblo to address their tribal environmental needs?
Sure, Nancy. I think probably the biggest goal at the moment is to take advantage of some of these new opportunities that are arising. A lot of it in part to the BIL, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, just to give a plug to for the next session on the summit. But I was talking to someone yesterday and they told me that it's unprecedented, the amount of opportunities that are becoming available, particularly for tribes in this set of funding. And there's so many aspects. I think the next one is going to be talking about some of the water, I believe, but under recycling, climate change, through the Department of Interior, there's going to be a lot of opportunities out there. And so I think it's going to be vital now that we take advantage of that. Also, so that it can help prepare us for a lot of these emerging threats. Although, for example, the PFAS isn't, it's gaining notoriety among the general public. So that's just, an example of something that not a lot of people were talking about, say, 5 years ago, but it's becoming a very important issue. And we just don't know what could be taking place 5 years from now. Another contaminant that could be affecting the natural resources of the tribes and pueblos here in our region that we need to be prepared for, because it seems like something is always happening. So that'd be the initial one. Just to try to take advantage of these new sources of funding. It's never fun to take on additional administrative burdens that always come with these funds. But right now it's becoming, I think it's becoming a necessity because of the amount of funding that is out there. And these programs that can do a lot of good. And we always see, well, I wouldn't say peaks and valleys as far as environmental opportunities go. Usually it's more like mesas and valleys. You never see a large increase, see, and then it come up, kind of flatten out again. So that'll probably happen again in the future. So I think it's important to act now, and hopefully the EPA will get a boost in this as well. It won't make up for all these years of cuts in funding, I think, but if we can take advantage of the funding that's happening as a result of this over the next couple of years, I think we can put ourselves in a good position to really have the programs firmly established, and also the technical capacity will could be greatly increased. That would be the initial one, and I guess a long-term goal, hopefully long-term, just to make sure our department is left in good hands, and that the program is able to continue to protect the resources that are important to the public.
Thank you, Dino, for sharing that with us. I'm trying to kind of keep an eye on the time, but Jennifer, on the last question, kind of touched on a little bit about focusing too on the youth and giving youth opportunities. I think that's one of the priorities we have here within our programs is that the outreach and being able to, whether it's annually during our environmental festival that takes place, where we invite some of the schools to come together. These last couple of years, of course, we've had to do it virtually, but it's important that we reach out and that we make that connection with the younger kids. But Cynthia, I just want to, I know I'm putting you on the spot, but I respect your opinions on these questions, but I want to know, what are your thoughts on how to increase the number of Native American that are entering or might be entering the environmental professional field?
I think it's the more I think we have, the better it is, especially, knowing that we're going to need the next generation to step up and fill our shoes. And, what is the best way or best approach we can do that? And how can we ensure that, we as directors, or we as technical staff now are motivators, or encouraging and mentoring young people to want to go into the work that we're doing here. I know oftentimes we don't really, I think, take a lot of consideration into how our positions can really help in creating an opportunity for young people to learn more about what it entails to do environmental natural resources management, and I'm hoping, as we build the capacity for the Pueblo or for the environment department again at Picaris, that we can be more involved and hands-on with youth. And, and I know that 8 Northern had their tribal environmental youth camp, and that was pretty much the premise of it, was, giving an opportunity for I think it was middle school to high school students, and even I think first year or freshman level college students, to be a part of the youth summit, so that way they themselves can get an understanding of what it takes to be an environmental director or manage natural resources for a tribe or a pueblo, and really looking at the dynamics for perhaps creating opportunities within our own communities for just that mentorship. I think it's imperative to ensure that we're able to do that. And to me, the more young people we have entering, whether it's an environmental, forestry, agricultural, water resources, any type of environmental program that can come, or environmental course or training or learning opportunity that they can come back and bring it back to the Pueblo, I think helps to not only increase their capacity and the opportunities for the Pueblos, but perhaps in many ways can also help to validate Indigenous knowledge and Indigenous sciences. And I think that's pretty much a route that we're going towards, given that the big push for integration of tribal, indigenous, or traditional ecological knowledge into a lot of adaptation planning. But, how do we really do that in a concrete, concerted effort where we're ensuring that, information that is shared or written down within plans or anything of that nature, that the rights to that cultural patrimony still stay and retain with the tribe and the pueblo, and that we have, the principles of indigenous data sovereignty, I think, is imperative as well as we move into the future. So I think the more we're able to integrate science into a lot of the learning that we have on a cultural and traditional level, I think really helps with that validation, but also could help encourage young people to want to enter into this field itself. Yeah, so thanks, Nancy.
Thank you, Cynthia. Looking at the time again, I'm kind of concerned if I started on another round of questions, we may run out of time. So I think we'll just go ahead and start getting ready for the next session that will, I believe, it begins at 11 o'clock. I want to thank our presenters, Cynthia, Monty, Jennifer, Dino. Thank you so much for agreeing to share with everyone today. I think it's a good reminder, for people that were able to participate with us today, as well as, they're going through the same type of challenges that we all face. But to me, it's an honor to be able to work with all of you. We all share the same kind of passion, I believe, that we want to get things accomplished, and we're going to look at different ways to, like you mentioned, leveraging our resources, things that we need. We're very creative, I think, within our programs to get a lot of the successes that we do. And I've seen that take place over the years. So again, I'd like to thank everyone. Did I see a hand raised, Karen?
No, it was actually someone clapping.
Oh, okay. I saw something there, but yeah. Again, the next session, or Karen, did you want to brief them on what's coming up here the rest of the day?
Sure. Yeah, and I just wanted to also say thank you so much to everyone for joining us this morning. We really appreciate it. And please join us again at 11 o'clock for the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, or the BIL session. It starts at 11. It goes till 12:30. And then again, at 2 o'clock, we'll meet till 3:30 for the current trends in air quality and permitting. So everyone, please join us again at 11, and we'll take a break until 11, and we'll hopefully see everybody back at 11. Thank you so much.
Bye. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay, it looks like it's 11 o'clock, and we'll go ahead and get this next session started. Welcome everyone to the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law session. Randy G will be our moderator for this session. So Randy, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Karen. Good morning, everyone. This is Randy G with the EPA Region 6 Office of Communities, Tribes, and Environmental Assessment. Hope everyone's doing well today. I'm up in Oklahoma for the air forum, and some weather came through last night, so I hope everybody was safe from the weather. So as Karen mentioned, this is the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law session. We'll have some opening remarks from Corey Bunnell, the EPA Region 6 Comptroller, and presentations from Thomas Cooney and Fran Verhalen today. Just to plug, so these are presentations on the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, but we also have some presentations next Tuesday at the 10:30 Brownfield session. There will be a discussion on bill opportunities related to brownfields. And then later that afternoon at 1 p.m., there'll be a discussion on bill recycling opportunities. So again, a plug for those sessions a week from today. But first, I'll turn it over to Corey Bunnell, the Region 6 Comptroller, for some opening remarks. Corey?
Thanks, Randy. Appreciate it. Good morning, everyone. Hope you're having a meaningful conference. I'm sure you are. So just up front, as the Comptroller of Region 6, I'm responsible to the Senior Resource Officer and the Regional Administrator primarily on oversight. So we already are in receipt of our program integrity draft guidance. The agency has been very quick at getting that information to us. So we are here to help the programs. The specific guidance for each program has come from the agency headquarters, from each national program manager, directly to the programs and divisions here at Region 6. So there is quite a bit of funding that has been provided to us in the bill legislation. And so we are here, we are generating reports as we speak. We are fine tuning that reporting for each of the programs to just make sure that we are compliant with the law and where the administration wants us to head with the execution of implementing the bipartisan infrastructure law and providing resources and opportunities for everyone. So I'm just going to hand it over to the programs. Like I said, I'm here for monitoring the budget, oversight, reporting, program integrity, and when it comes, and we all know it will come, that the audit agencies, probably know the acronyms of all those audit agencies out there, we'll probably start seeing, and this is speculation on my part, but as we close this fiscal year FY22, we'll start to see those things start to happen early FY23, which is beginning October 1st. So just real upfront, those are my responsibilities. My office, the budget office and the finance office and the grants and acquisition office assist the programs and get everything done that they need to get done. And if you have any questions in that regard, please feel free to contact me or my staff, my section managers in those areas. So without any further discussion on my part or delay, let's just go straight over to Tom. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Corey, and thank you, Randy, as well. Good morning, everyone. I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to present this information to you today. Little background on myself. My name is Tom Cooney. I'm in the Community Infrastructure section in the Water Division in EPA Region 6. I'm an environmental engineer. I've been in Region 6 since June of last year. Prior to that, I was in Region 4 in the Southeast since 2010. And for 10 years prior to that, I was working in the engineering consulting field in private industry. So been on both sides of the water infrastructure business. So what I'm here to discuss today is to present information that we know right now related to our water infrastructure impact of the bipartisan infrastructure law. Again, I'm trying to keep it general because some of you may know quite a bit of information on what bill is about, as we call it, and some may not know a lot. And so what I'd like to provide you is a very solid overview of the impact on water. Water infrastructure is a key component of this from EPA's standpoint, and one where we are tremendously funded for the years moving forward, and it can have a game-changing type impact on communities far and wide, and tribal nations as well as territories. So keeping all this in mind, one thing I do want to say before I begin is that specific guidance that's related to tribal nations, related to, let's say, the Clean and Drinking Water Infrastructure Program, are not yet developed and are not yet in our pocket in the region. So we don't have detailed info to share related to specifically what the impact on tribes is, what dollar values will be there for each area. We don't know that quite yet. We're waiting on that from our colleagues at headquarters, and when we do get it, we will certainly make that information available to everyone. So just moving forward, and again, if there are any questions during the course of this, I believe we're going to take questions at the end of the presentations, but if you do have comments, please add them to the chat box, and we'll follow up all on that once we conclude. So a little bit of background. What is BILL? So the bipartisan infrastructure law, which we're referring to as BILL, if you do want to look it up and read the text of the law, it's actually, the title is the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. It was signed into law by President Biden on November 15th of 2021. And what is it? Well, for us in EPA, it represents the single largest investment in water that the federal government has ever made. And our agency here is committed very, very strongly in working with our state, tribes, territories, and all of our partners to seize this moment. This is, as I mentioned, this is a potential game-changing moment as far as water infrastructure goes. So how will Bill impact the EPA? Well, the bipartisan infrastructure law contains a few major items that impact our program across the board. This applies to our states, territories, tribal nations. It reauthorizes our existing EPA programs through fiscal year 2026. Now, reauthorization just sets a budget cap for our dollars for our program. That does not exactly appropriate funds. That will be appropriated through our regular year appropriations laws. But it did reauthorize the programs, as that has to be done on a regular rolling basis. The bipartisan infrastructure law also provided some changes to language in the Clean Water Act and Safe Drinking Water Act, some of which apply very specifically to programs that we have. The most important and the most critical part, and the part that we're all interested in, is that it appropriates supplemental funding, and it appropriates a significant amount of supplemental funding, as you'll see in just a moment. And the fourth bulleted item, which is also very, very important and something that may be new to a lot of us, is that Bill institutes requirements called Build America, Buy America. We refer to it as BABA, B-A-B-A. And we'll have a slide on that in a little bit, but it institutes Build America, Buy America requirements in all federally funded infrastructure assistance agreements. That's not just EPA, that's every federal agency. And like I said, we'll talk about that in just a few short minutes, because that right now could have a significant impact on cost. So how much supplemental funding for EPA water programs is in Bill? Again, this is the largest water investment the federal government has ever made. So supplemental funding has been provided for water programs for fiscal years 2022 through fiscal years 2026. For most of the programs, dollars will be allocated annually. So right now, as Corey has mentioned, funding for the FY22 portion of Bill is in the region, has been allocated. Funding for the out years has yet to be allocated, but we know what the top line national numbers are. So we can get an estimate in terms of where our dollars will go. But let's talk about what those dollars are, because they're incredibly significant. The crux of the funding was poured into the state revolving fund programs, which obviously is our main water infrastructure investment program. Both clean water and drinking water programs over the 5-year period were appropriated over $43 billion in total. This $43 billion and that budget line includes where tribal infrastructure set-asides do come out of. That is a significant amount of funding for the agency. There is an emerging contaminants pot of money under the Water Infrastructure Investments for the Nation Act, which set up a 2104 program, which was for small, underserved, and disadvantaged communities. It's set up now an emerging contaminants pot to be funded at $1 billion a year for 22 through 26. I believe, I have not been on a lot of the discussions related to that particular program, but I believe that program also will have a tribal component. So it's very important that if there is something that you are engaged on that, because again, that is a significant amount of money in a given fiscal year for the next 5 years. And it all details and goes back to emerging contaminants. Our Lake Pontchartrain Geographic Initiative is also receiving a supplement of $10.6 million per year over the next 5 years. Our National Estuary Program receiving over $26 million per year in addition to what we normally receive. Action in Gulf Epoxy Action Plan, $12 million per year. Save Our Seas 2.0, $55 million a year. UIC $50 million total, well permitting, Class 6 well permitting, $5 million a year. So as you can see, a significant amount of supplemental funding. This funding is meant to be over and above what EPA's regular annual funding is. So that is a significant increase in funding over the next 5 federal fiscal years, which will impact us beyond those 5 years, obviously. So as far as EPA's infrastructure funding priorities, what are they? Well, priority number 1 is to target our resources toward disadvantaged communities in all of these. There is a push, certainly, through Justice 40 initiative to move funding to provide it to those communities who need it most, who have aging infrastructure on the water side that really needs improvement. So the goal, and one of the key goals, is to target resources in that direction. Number 2 is to make rapid progress on lead-free water for all. And you'll see in a few minutes when I start talking about the changes to the State Revolving Fund program, how we're planning to do that. Item 3 is to tackle forever chemicals, PFAS, emerging contaminants. Again, this ties in to work through the State Revolving Fund program. And there's an incredible opportunity here on items 2 and 3 there. And the 4th item is job creation through infrastructure projects, job creation through the potential long-term O&M jobs that may be created as a result of some of this new infrastructure, as well as manufacturing job creation through BABA. So we'll do an aside now, and we'll talk about BABA. This is a portion of the infrastructure law that is in there, and it is called the Build America, Buy America Act. Now, again, we refer to it as BABA. What does BABA do? Well, what BABA does is it expands domestic preference requirements for all federal infrastructure programs to include iron and steel, construction materials, and all manufactured goods. What does that mean? How will that impact us? Well, if you know, and you may not, but the State Revolving Fund program has been operating with an American iron and steel requirement since 2010. Those AIS requirements have been in place that require domestic preference for iron and steel. This is expanding that requirement to all federal infrastructure programs, but also including construction materials and manufactured goods. There are avenues for waivers from Build America, Buy America. Cost is one of those issues. If there are approved plans and specs, that may be a waiver that is approvable. The contents of Build America, Buy America will become effective for all assistance agreements across the board in the federal government on May 14th, 2022. EPA is not managing this. Because this is a federal government-wide initiative, the White House Office of Management and Budget is the main management role as far as overseeing Build America, Buy America. I will point out that EPA is planning on issuing a document that discusses the programs that will be impacted by Build America, Buy America, and what it means for the agency in terms of how the agency plans on moving forward with implementing BABA. We're still awaiting that. That will need to undergo public review. But I can tell you that earlier in January, programs were identified which BABA would apply to. And since a large portion of the tribal infrastructure programs, clean water and drinking water, are funded through the SRF assistance numbers, that it certainly appears that our clean water and drinking water tribal set-aside programs will have to comply for now with Build America, Buy America. So please, that's something to absolutely keep in mind, that this is a reality, and it is something that we're going to, that is another item that is going to be fed into terms and conditions of all federal assistance agreements moving forward. So how are we going about implementing BIL on the water side? Well, EPA headquarters, our colleagues up there are working very, very hard to develop programmatic implementation memos to address various funding allocations. I can speak from the state revolving fund side of things that the SRF programs have an implementation memo out, and some of the discussion that I'm going to have today related to some of our definitions will tie back to that. Because for the drinking water and clean water tribal set-aside programs, those all play together. So we have something from that, but some of our other programs are still working on implementing guidance, getting it approved before it can go out the door and be made available to the regions, and then of course to our stakeholders. So please keep that in mind. And the SRF was the first to put something out. We're still waiting on most others at this point in time. But overall, our goal of bill implementation is to inform and collaborate with our partners so that we can maximize the impact of these funds, because we're tasked with addressing urgent water challenges in communities across the country, particularly communities that we all may consider disadvantaged communities. So incredibly, incredibly important. So let's talk about state revolving fund, because that is where the crux of the funding coming through in bill is. And, you know, the clean water and drinking water tribal set-aside programs are taken off the top, a percentage off the top of the state revolving fund funding. Also, tribal nations can apply to the states to be included as part of the SRF programs in the states. Some states, you know, there may be some roadblocks to that. We hope that that is, you know, not really an issue going forward. But, you know, tribal nations, if you don't know that, you can also apply. You are an eligible entity to apply to the state programs as well for some of the SRF funding. You'll see the funding is significant, and there is a significant amount of subsidy that is available. So please keep that in mind. But the state revolving fund program, as well as the clean and drinking water tribal set-asides, have known one program for years. That program, as far as bill is concerned, is considered that general supplemental. It holds all of our existing eligibilities on the clean and the drinking water side. There are two, I call them specialized pots of SRF money that now are created under bill, and it's just for bill funding. One is on the drinking water side, and it applies to lead service lines. It is for complete replacement of lead service lines where they can be found. I'll talk a little bit about some of the items that can be funded with that, and you can think of, I guess, and consider some opportunities that you might be able to have. Emerging contaminants is another supplemental, and that applies to both clean water and drinking water. There are going to be more than likely different definitions used for each. But these are three pots of money. Typically with our set-aside programs as well as SRF, we just deal with one pot of money. But now these two specialized additional programs were added under bill to, again, focus and tackle PFAS and to help speed the elimination of lead service lines across the country. So I mentioned that state revolving fund was getting over $43 billion total, 22 through 26. This is a chart that breaks that number down. This is the national total. So you can see that there is an increasing amount of the base clean water and drinking water programs in columns 2 and 3. Column 4 is the lead service line, which is funded nationally at $3 billion a year. And again, you'll see as I break this down into the tribal allocation, you will see how the tribal set-asides will be getting a significant amount of funding out of lead service lines. And then you see the breakdown in clean water emerging contaminants and drinking water emerging contaminants. So in FY22 overall, over $7.7 billion in fiscal 22 has been supplemented to our state revolving fund programs, and also through the creation of 3 new specialized SRF pots of money, a significant increase in funding. And please keep in mind that this also is a funding over and above what we expect to receive in our normal fiscal year 2022 numbers, which have not yet been released to us, but are in the works. So this is supplemented over and above that. So one of the things that we have received in our implementation document for state revolving fund is a tribal supplemental allocation. And we know this on a national basis. We don't know this on a more regionalized scale. And so this is what we're working with right now. This is what we are coordinating with IHS to understand what projects are out there, what projects IHS will be taking hold of. They have a significant amount of supplemental funding through bill as well to do this work. So in the regions, we're right now debating and considering whether we're going to have to change our tactics here in Region 6. We typically work in an interagency agreement with IHS and co-fund these projects with our funding. But, you know, we're debating right now whether that's even going to be available to us as an action under these bill funds and the bill pots of money, or whether we have to go a direct grant route, which would mean active solicitation with you all. So, but what does it mean in 2022? Well, our general supplemental, which is our regular program as we know it, our Clean Water Tribal Set Aside and our Drinking Water Infrastructure Grant Tribal Set Aside program, those supplementals are funded at over $38 million, clean water and drinking water, same amount for fiscal year 22. That represents a significant increase on the drinking water side. I believe in fiscal 21, I'm scrolling through my book right now, it was about $22 million nationally for drinking water in the tribal set-aside programs. Clean water, I believe, is a little bit over 30. It is an increase. And again, this is in addition to money that will be available through the regular appropriations process. So again, out of this, the funding will be provided through the Clean Water Tribal Set-Aside Program and the DWIP program. And as I mentioned before, and I'll mention again, you'll hear it from me in all of my slides here, is that implementation information and regional level allocations are still under development and have not been made privy to us. So we're still waiting on that. Everything I'm presenting you here is publicly available information. Those regional allocations are not available at this time. We do expect them soon, though. So what about lead service line supplementals? Well, lead service line, just based on the amount of money that's being made available nationally, the tribal allotment for FY22 comes in at about $60 million. This is obviously, I had mentioned, a new specialized program that's tied to the SRF. In a moment, I'll just go over what the thinking is right now related to what this can fund, so that you all can begin to think about that as well. And obviously, as I mentioned before, implementation info and our regional allocations are still under development for this. We don't have that yet as to how much in our region here and across the country, what portion, how that $60 million is going to be divvied out. But for the lead service line, the amount of money stays the same, is static for 22 through 26. So the expectation is that we're going to be looking at about $60 million across the board for the next 5 years, specifically for lead service line. So these are very highly specialized funds. And so this definition of the eligibilities comes from our state revolving fund implementation document. So just to give you some insights as to what the thought process is here. But the eligibilities are limited to eligible lead service line replacement projects and associated activities that are directly connected with identifying, planning, design, and replacement of lead service lines. So yes, one of the questions we've gotten quite frequently, you know, can this type of thing pay for a study to do a lead service line inventory? Yes. You know, obviously will pay for planning and design if you do know or find that you do have lead service lines? Yes. Will it replace it in full? Yes. So this is again an extremely important piece of the bill puzzle, because it goes forth with the administration's proposal to eliminate lead service lines across the country. So that's what we're looking at as far as this goes. Again, this is a $60 million of availability per year for 22 through 26, specifically dealing with lead service lines. Now, emerging contaminants, a little bit of a different story, not as much as lead service lines, but again, national allocations on the clean water side is about $2 million for fiscal year 22. On the drinking water side, amounts to about $16 million for fiscal year 22. Again, specialized program that is tied into the state revolving fund, and implementation information, regional allocations for tribes are still under development. We should know that very soon. So how has the Clean Water State Revolving Fund program defined emerging contaminants? I would say that it has defined it rather broadly. The eligibilities that we are discussing as far as our implementation there, it is limited to eligible projects that are addressing substances and microorganisms, including manufactured or naturally occurring physical, chemical, biological, radiological, or nuclear materials, which are known or anticipated in the environment that may pose newly identified or re-emerging risks to human health, aquatic life, or the environment. The key thing is that if it's basically a contaminant that is not regulated, that has an impact on water quality, it is potentially eligible under this specific pot of funding. Again, any of these projects can be funded with the general supplemental pot of funding as well as any tribal set-aside funding. But this is very specific and specifically targeted at these particular emerging contaminants. So it's a rather broad definition as far as clean water goes. On the drinking water side of the house, as far as emerging contaminants, that definition is very focused on PFAS. The statutory language of the bill actually refers to PFAS. So there is a specific push, especially on the drinking water side, to address PFAS. If there's concern at other contaminants, how can we address that? But certainly in the state revolving fund definition, which I'm assuming is going to carry over to our tribal set-aside programs, any project that addresses a contaminant listed on any of EPA's contaminant candidate list is also potentially eligible for use of this funding. So that opens it up a little more past PFAS. And of course, identification, that is certainly something that could certainly be considered an eligible cost, as well as planning, design, and construction, specifically tied to reducing the impact of emerging contaminants. So again, these are game-changing potential pots of money that we have never dealt with before, and it's very exciting for us. So I'll be wrapping up here. I have 2 more slides. So what are some potential challenges? Because there are challenges for this. These bill investments are in addition to annual EPA program appropriations. So we acknowledge that this is additional work for our state partners, tribal nations, territories, for, again, organizations like y'all who may be experiencing some staffing challenges. Certainly that's understandable. And we understand that, looking at what we're dealing with here is going to take some time. And so, again, there's an expectation that regular EPA program appropriations are coming. This is in addition to it. And the second potential challenge, which we have heard a lot of from states and municipal entities, as well as I know I've heard from some tribal entities in Oklahoma, Build America, Buy America provisions can be a challenge right now. Understanding those, particularly when we're at a time of shortages in our supply chain, and we're at a time when prices are very high, and that can obviously have an impact on project budgets, project timeframes, because there is such an increase in the amount of time for production, particularly domestically, since there will be so much domestic manufacturing competition as a result of the BABA requirements. But we have opportunities, and our opportunities are really game-changing level opportunities. Bill makes a generational investment in clean and drinking water infrastructure. It is going to help us identify and finally remove lead drinking water service lines, and obviously also the potential for removal or at least neutralization of potential PFAS impacts. And it also provides our agency, our state partners, tribal nations, and our territories with significant funding for our programs to help to continue to carry out our mission. Again, bill provides an opportunity for a game-changing situation with water infrastructure across the country. We all know water infrastructure is aging. We know there are issues out there. And, you know, bill provides that chance to go over and above what we normally would be able to do to provide so much for our communities. And this is an opportunity to do so. So I'm sure that there may be some questions out there, and I think this is a good time to probably address those. My presentation kind of wrapped up. I'm looking at the clock a couple of minutes early. Again, I thank you for your time. I thank Randy for inviting me to chat here. Again, as we get more information, that will, and I hope, be disseminated to you all, because you know, knowing what we really have out there is important. And again, there may be some additional outreach that we are going to have to do from Region 6's Water Division that we normally would not do for our Tribal Set-Aside Infrastructure Program, simply because, you know, coordination with IHS under programs like lead service line replacement and emerging contaminants, that opportunity may not be there under this. So, you know, that is something that we're going to have to work on very carefully, and we're trying to craft a path forward within our water division and within our branch and section right now to try to have a better idea as to how to do that. And so I hope that this informed you. I hope that this gave you some idea in terms of the incredible impact that this could have across the country, and specifically on items like lead service line replacement and items on emerging contaminants, but just in general for our water issues out there. This is a game-changing potential moment for us. And, you know, we are committed to working and working hard and very closely with y'all to answer as many questions as we can and to provide as much feedback as we can. So again, I really appreciate the time. I thank you for listening. My contact information is there. Please feel free to reach out to me. I am in our section, I deal with the state of New Mexico as far as the SRF programs on the state side goes, but I'm dealing with the tribal nations in Oklahoma as far as the drinking water and clean water set-asides. So, you know, feel free to reach out at me anytime, and hopefully I'll have some more information to give to you in the very near future. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Thomas, for your presentation. Karen, can you help me if there are any questions? I guess, what are the instructions for muting, I guess?
Sure. And anyone can unmute themselves, or you guys can use the chat box if you would like. And Tom, you might check your chat box just to make sure there's any questions or comments in your chat box. But
I will.
yeah, if anybody has any questions, please, or you can raise your hand also. You can use that feature also. So if there's any questions, we'll take them now.
Karen, I'm not seeing any questions, hands raised, or anybody, or in the chat. Do you see anything?
No, I don't see anything in the chat box either. Tom, did you happen to see any in your chat box?
No, I do not see anything in my chat box.
Okay. So if you guys just think of something a little later, you can always put it in the chat box a little later, or after the fact, you can always email it to me, and I'll be glad to forward it to Tom.
Yeah, thank you very, very much. I do appreciate it.
Thank you, Tom. And again, yeah, any questions for Tom, even after Fran's presentation, we can go back to Tom. So next, we'll go to Fran Verhalen, who will talk about the clean school bus opportunities.
Pull my screen up. Second.
You should be good to share your screen now. There you go.
Yep, we can see it now.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Fran Verhalen. and I'm the section chief for the ambient air monitoring and grant section. And I'm also coordinating the clean school bus program currently for Region 6. I have just hired a new employee, Hafiz Mohammed Amir, who is going to be taking charge of this program over the next couple of months. And I'm just looking so forward to his assistance. He started with me a week ago. So he's been busy learning everything there is to learn about the program, but he still needs a little bit of seasoning. So I'm talking about the Clean School Bus rebates. This is part of the BIL program. And so we're just so excited about it. The bipartisan infrastructure law provides for EPA $5 billion over the next 5 years to spur the transformation of the nation's fleet of school buses. What we really are interested in doing is working to ensure that we're engaging with the stakeholders as we develop the program. We're going to evolve this program for clean school buses as needed as we work through providing the money out to the different schools, school systems, local governments that fund the school buses. So we're going to be working and making changes as we need to, as we learn things over the next 5 years. One of the things we're working to do is promote a cost parity, meaning we're trying to get a balance in the cost between the different bus technologies. Electric buses cost differently than diesel buses or than a propane bus or compressed natural gas. So we're working on looking at those cost differences and seeing if we can equilibrate them some. We want to provide and allow school districts to have multiple opportunities to apply for funding. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. We want to maximize the number of zero emission and clean school buses that get funded. So we're looking at different funding amounts for different school districts that have different amounts of resources for them. And finally, we want to ensure a broad geographic distribution of awards. We don't want all the awards just in the major cities or just in the rural counties. We want them spread out. A quick overview, you heard a lot of it, of this information from Tom a minute ago, but specifically for the Title IX of the Clean School Buses and Ferries under the bipartisan infrastructure law, we'll be providing $5 billion over the next 5 years to replace existing school buses with clean school buses and zero emission school buses. The new clean school bus replacements will produce either zero or low tailpipe emissions compared to diesel emissions. The school bus upgrades funded under this program will result in cleaner air on the bus, in the bus loading areas, and in the communities where they operate. A lot of times the buses will stop and stand as they're waiting for students to be released from school, and they load the buses. And right now they're idling right in front of the schools. So if we can have zero emission or low tailpipe emissions, that will improve the air quality around our children who are so vulnerable for respiratory disease. And finally, we're going to start this program with the 2020 Clean School Bus rebates. We're going to be looking at rebate programs, competitive grant programs, and contracting. I'll talk about those a little more as we go through the presentation, but let me start with the rebates. We are expecting to get the rebate program issued by the end of this month. It may be as early as next week. But our goal is May of 2022 to have the request for applications posted online on EPA's website. And I've got the website later in the presentation. For the Clean School Bus Program, of the $5 billion total amount for the nation, half of that money, $2.5 billion, is dedicated for zero emission school buses. This is basically an electric school bus. We're looking at approximately $500 million every year for the next 5 years to fund zero emission school buses. The other half of the money is dedicated for clean, that is low tailpipe emission, or zero emission school buses. So we may actually have more money going toward electric buses than just half of it. But half is dedicated for the zero emission and half is dedicated for clean and zero emission school buses. What are the benefits? Well, first off, if you have a zero emission bus, you have zero tailpipe emissions. You have no pollution from your tailpipe. With alternative fuel buses, you have a reduced tailpipe emission. So you have cleaner air associated with these buses. You'll also have reduced greenhouse gas emissions compared to diesel buses for either one of these, depending especially on the alternative fuel buses, on that type of fuel that is chosen. But you have a great deal of potential for reducing your greenhouse gas footprint. There's potential for reduced maintenance and fuel costs on both these types of vehicles. If you think about it, with an electric school bus, you don't have gasoline and you don't have oil changes you got to deal with. So your maintenance staff don't have to deal with these particular fuels. The reduced fuel costs for alternative fuel buses, such as compressed natural gas or propane, are typically reduced compared to diesel, but it depends on the alternative fuel that is actually chosen. And finally, for a zero emission bus, such as an electric bus, you have the potential to partner with local utilities to feed the power back into the grid when the buses are not in use, or and when the electricity demand is high, such as in the summer when the buses aren't being used. The power grid that supplies the electricity for the buses can be diverted back into the power grid for other uses. And especially if you're in, the hot Southwest where we're located, it's kind of hot in the summer and a lot of people use air conditioning, but the school districts may be able to put electricity back into the grid because they're not having to fuel their school buses with it. So it's something to think about. As we set up these funding programs, school districts may apply directly for the funds, but they can only submit one application for each funding pool. And that application can replace up to 25 buses. We will not fund multiple applications from the same, that serve the same school district. So if the school district puts one in and the local municipality puts one in for that same school district, one of them will be ineligible because it is for the same school district. We're looking at having a pool exclusively for applications that are requesting zero emissions used. And then we will make choices within that The second pool, again, is for the clean school bus or the low tailpipe emission buses. And that could be zero emission, propane, compressed natural gas. EPA started out with the rebate program because it is the fastest program that we can get funding out to our participants. It is the quickest timeline fleets can get to receive the funding. We have very straightforward rules for the rebate program and for the bus replacements and infrastructure only. And with the rebate program, we've been able to streamline the application, the selection process, and the funding processes so that we can push the money out faster. We're still looking at options for grant programs and other funding opportunities, and we're anticipating providing a competitive grant opportunity this fall. Please watch for the announcements for that also. Okay, here's some timelines for you. We do expect the Clean School Bus Rebate Program, the application announcement, to be made in the next couple of weeks. We are going to have the application open for approximately 60 days. I have to double check, and I can't remember because we did make a change on the date for that. But it should be from May through August. Check the application to be sure on the dates. Once all the applications are in and the application process is closed, we will go through and complete the selection process. We will begin notifying the applicants of their selection in October of this year. Then the selectees will need to submit a payment request form with the purchase order. Now, this is just saying this is what we plan to do. We've got it on purchase order. That has to be submitted by April of 2023. Then you have to receive the buses and submit the closeout form in approximately 18 months after that, October 2020. And this will all be in the application process. Who's eligible? State and local governments that are responsible for school bus services, such as an independent school district, or who may be purchasing the buses for that independent school district, such as a municipality. Nonprofit school transportation associations, eligible contractors, and Indian tribes, tribal organizations, or tribally controlled schools. This may be schools that the tribes send their children to, the tribal members send their children to, but that the tribes don't own. Quickly, state and local government entities include public school districts. It's those entities that provide the school bus service. We include the territories, including Washington, D.C., Puerto Rico and Guam, American Samoa, Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. Public charter schools with an NCES district ID are also eligible to apply directly for funding. Most state governments do not own the bus fleets and therefore are not eligible to apply, but some do, such as South Carolina. In our region, I don't believe any of our states actually are going to be eligible to apply because they fund eligible independent school districts. For the tribes, we're looking at Indian tribes who are eligible, tribal organizations, tribally controlled schools responsible for the purchase of school buses or providing school bus service for for a Bureau of Indian Affairs funded school. These are all eligible for this funding. Nonprofit school transportation associations may be something along the lines of a council of government that is organized and works with local school districts to provide student transportation. And eligible contractors. Again, the contractors must have the capacity to sell the school buses and related charging or fueling infrastructure to the school bus owners or arrange the financing of such a sale. All these contractors must meet and eligible, must meet the criteria. The criteria for the private school buses, for the contractors, include you have to have eligible partners for partnering with the private fleet owners. So you have to work with the contractor, or the contractors must work with the private fleet owners. The example we have is if the big yellow bus company would apply to replaces owned by a private fleet, Safety First school buses. The buses themselves serve a specific school district, and that school district is under contract to the private fleet. So all of the paperwork for this has to be in order and be part of the application process. One of the things too, all of the buses that are purchased must serve that particular school district for at least 5 years. And that is for all of our school bus funding. Earlier, Mr. Bunnell mentioned audit programs. This will be one of the items that the auditors will be looking for, is where are the buses? Are the buses still where they're supposed to be within 5 years? I'm gonna just jump through those real quick. That was just giving different examples of the contracting scenarios. One of the things that we're doing as we work through this process currently, we're looking at prioritizing our applicants. We're looking at those applicants that will replace the school buses that serve school districts in areas of financial disadvantage and in environmental justice areas. So we are looking at some of these different prioritizations, and all of the prioritizations will be defined in the application process. Here's some of the criteria. The high-need school districts and low-income areas. This is going to be one of the top 3 prioritizations. We're looking at working with the school districts in areas that have 20% or more children living in poverty. We're looking at the rural school districts. Those have to be defined by the National Center for Educational Statistics. And finally, our third prioritization is the tribal school districts. The Bureau of Indian Affairs funding school districts and those school districts that receive basic support payment for children who reside on Indian land. The guidelines for the buses that are 2010 or older, model years that are 2010 or older, they are diesel powered, must be scrapped if they are selected for funding. If for some reason you've had lots of money and you just went through and you purchased your buses 8 or 9 years ago, you would like to get the zero emission school bus replacements. Those may be eligible. And you do not have to scrap those buses that are newer, model year newer than 2011. They may be able to be sold or donated. You can scrap them. You don't have to. We're looking for gross vehicle weight ratings, 10,000 pounds or more. At the time of application submission, the buses have to be operational. You can't pull them out of the back field and put them on your wish list. They have to be owned by the fleet that will receive the replacement bus. And those buses must have been in service at least 3 days a week on average during the 2021-2022 school year at the time of application. The caveat for this is we are looking at how that school year is defined, because many school districts were still at home schooling for part of the district year. So if the buses were running only for 7 months, then the average would be 3 days per week over those 7 months. If they were running for 9 months, the average would be over 9 months for 2021 and 2022. The new replacement buses must be battery electric, compressed natural gas or propane drivetrain. Must be a certified vehicle model of year 2021 or newer. Need a gross vehicle weight rating of 10,000 pounds or more. You cannot have ordered the vehicle prior to the official notification of selection. And the buses must be purchased. They may not be leased or leased to own. As I mentioned earlier, this new replacement buses must serve the school district for at least 5 years from the date of delivery, and the buses must be in that school district that is listed on the application. As normal, the buses must meet the federal safety standard. They must be maintained and operated appropriately in accordance with the manufacturer's recommendations and state requirements. Cannot have unvented diesel passenger heaters. This is not as high a priority in a vehicle, in a bus down here in the south, but in the north, they sometimes have these. On these school bus replacements, this type of heater is not going to be allowed. You cannot fund this with another federal fund. And upon request, the buses must be made available for inspection. Okay, a couple of things. We're going to be funding up to $375,000 per bus, depending on the bus type and depending on the eligibility. So the maximum amount for an electric school bus class 7 or greater would be $375,000. For a propane bus, which is a class 3 to 6, we will be providing a maximum of $25,000 for reimbursement. And those are for the prioritization criteria areas. So again, that goes back to the rural areas, the tribal areas, and those school districts with more than 20% of their children at a poverty level above the poverty level. So those three. For other eligible school districts, we'll reimburse from $15,000 up to $250,000. We also are going to be funding the infrastructure development. Again, it's going to be, funding is eligible from $13,000 up to $20,000 for that infrastructure per bus. For the infrastructure funding restrictions, we do have a couple, but first and foremost, EPA will pay for the infrastructure construction from the meter to the bus. We do not pay for the infrastructure from the electric meter to the utility distribution network, the power pole. We don't pay that side of it. And then the level 2 charging infrastructure stations must be EPA Energy Star certified. The application process, please check with EPA's Clean School Bus rebate forms that are out on our website. You have to have an active System of Award Management entity registration. That is sam.gov. We have information out on our website that will have question and answers for you, but also if you have questions, please contact us here at EPA. The sam.gov registration is very important. It is active. Please check to make sure that you are an active user. This is how you will be able to see the request for application as well as propose your application at sam.gov. Please feel free to look through the site if you're not already registered. If you have any questions, please contact me, Hafiz Mohammed, or Anjane Gautreau. For the AIR grant people, a lot of you people already know Anjane. So she can help you with this registration also. Once applications are received by the deadline, we are going to use a random number generator lottery process. We will make our first awards, at least one per state, with the tribal priority criteria list, and then make sure that we have at least one per state, and then we will go to the next round until we use the funds up. If we use all the funds up, great. You know, we'll look at that. Those projects may be eligible to be re-entered into the grant competition or a future rebate program. EPA will notify applicants of their selection within 60 days of the application deadline. Once they receive notice of selection, they must submit online forms regarding their payment request for the purchase orders for the new school buses. As I mentioned earlier, once we select you, once you're informed, once the process is going, you have to submit the closeout form within 2 years of the date of the selection notice. And again, all this information will be included in the request for application forms. And finally, just a quick summary, we will be awarding approximately $500 million in rebate funding for zero emission and clean school buses starting later this month. We expect to have a grant competition announced in the fall of 2022 for $500 million. We will have other programs in 2023, 2024, 2025, and 2026. I want you to understand that this is not the only time that we will be offering this type of program. So over the next 5 years, we will be pushing out requests for application either through rebates or through grants. We may figure out, we're still working on the language of contracting programs, but we are working on that also. So don't forget to go ahead and start getting your sam.gov registration completed, checked out to make sure that it's active. If you need to, start having a conversation with your local utility to see if they can provide you information about how to construct that infrastructure you would need for zero emission buses. We're going to continue to provide information on our website, and also pushing out information. We are trying to develop our listserv so we can just send you emails talking about please apply, here's how you need to apply, here's some information you can use. We're going to continue to do that. And then finally, the online application period, we anticipate opening for the rebate later this month, should be in May, and it will close in August. Strongly recommend you sign up for the Clean School Bus listserv at www.epa.gov/clean school bus. That's all, it's all run together. So we have the latest program updates. We keep that website updated as often as we can. So information is out there. We've had a couple of presentations over the last 6 months. Those are all recorded up there. We're also providing information about what a clean school bus is, as well as what zero emission school buses are. So I encourage you to go ahead and take a look at that. And I thank you for your time this afternoon, or well, this morning and afternoon. And I'm open for questions whenever. And that's what I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Fran. I see Karen posted some information in the chat, so please look at the chat. Any questions for Fran? And I'll work with Karen to see if there are any questions coming for you, Fran, in the chat, or see hands raised.
I don't see anything in the chat box just yet, Randy.
Okay.
Fran, you might check your chat box also. Yeah, if anybody has any questions, you can go ahead and unmute yourselves right now and ask the question if you'd like.
I'm not seeing any questions in my chat box, but I'm not sure I'm looking in the right spot either, Karen. I opened up the one and I didn't see anything. So.
Okay. Okay. I don't see anything just yet either.
I appreciate the opportunity to let me talk a little bit about the Clean School Bus program. I think it's going to be a very good program over the next 5 years, and I encourage those of you who work with the schools to think about applying for this and working toward getting those electric school buses. One of the challenges I know that some of the school districts in more rural areas have is the travel distance that the school buses have to run to pick up their students. So some of the further flung students, you know, some school districts will drive 70 miles for their route in the morning and for the afternoon. And that sounds like a whole lot for electric buses. The technology has improved a great deal. Most school buses currently have a range of 250 miles before recharging. So that's one of the improvements, and they're continuing to look at improvements in the battery technology. The manufacturers have been working very hard to improve so that they can have further ranges.
I guess last call for any questions for Fran or Thomas today on their presentations. Karen, I don't see any. So again, Just want to thank our presenters today. Excellent job. And again, a plug for next Tuesday's presentations on bill opportunities regarding brownfields and recycling. And I wish you all a great day. And Karen, the next session is at 2? Is that the air session?
Yes, at 2:00. Yeah, thank you, Randy, for moderating, and Fran and Tom, thank you so much for presenting. We really appreciate it. And thank you to everyone that called in and attended this session. And make sure and don't forget to join us again at 2:00 from 2 to 3:30 for current trends in the air quality and permitting. So with that, we'll go ahead and take a break for everybody to go to lunch, and we'll see you guys back here at 2:00. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Take care.
Morning, welcome back to the Tribal Environmental Summit. This afternoon's session is going to be current trends in air quality and permitting. We have 4 speakers for the session today, so if you have any questions, let's wait till in between the sessions and ask the questions. And then if you have one during that any of the presentations, just go ahead and leave your question in the chat box. With that, I'll go ahead and open it up for our first speakers: Ambient Air Pollutant Update, Susan Apodaca, Josh Madden, and Nia Riddick from EPA Region 6.
Okay, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
We can.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay, and can everybody see my screen now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining. My name is Suzanne Apodaca, and I'm going to be giving you an ambient air pollutant update. I'm mostly going to be discussing ozone, but I did want everyone to be aware that I am the EPA regional contact for not only ozone, but also nitrogen oxides, carbon monoxide, and ozone precursors, volatile organic compounds. So just a bit of background. I've been at EPA Region 6 for about 2.5 years now, but just within the past 6 months, recently transitioned into the role of pollutant lead. So I'll have my contact information on the last slide should you have any questions over this presentation or just any questions in the future, and feel free to contact me at any time. So I just wanted to kind of begin with some executive updates. I wanted to talk a little bit about what's been going on in the news lately, the ozone NAAQS reconsideration. So this is in response to legal action to reevaluate the 2020 decision to retain the 2015 ozone standard. The draft policy assessment was released by EPA staff here not too long ago, just on April 28th, with the major conclusion that there was not enough new scientific evidence to strengthen the current ozone standards. Therefore, they're proposing to retain the current 2015 standards, which is set at 70 parts per billion. However, should you all choose to be involved in this process, they are accepting public comments on this draft document through May 31st. And in addition, there's a special independent panel by the Clean Air Scientific Advisory Committee set to review the draft beginning on April 29th. Then they'll meet again on June 3rd and several more times that month. And this entire ozone NAAQS reconsideration is targeted completion date sometime in the end of 2023. So continuing some of these executive updates, I want to talk a little bit about the ozone non-attainment designations that have been occurring recently that impact our region. So the El Paso County was previously designated as attainment/unclassifiable. However, there was some legal action challenging this designation. And since then, Sunland Park has expanded into what is now known as the El Paso, Las Cruces, Texas, New Mexico non-attainment area. Therefore, it's designated as marginal non-attainment based on the 2015 standard. Now, this means that El Paso will be required to file a state implementation plan. And as for more non-attainment status updates, there's several areas in this recent proposal throughout Texas that are proposed to be reclassified. And that will come with additional measures to protect public health and submission of new plans. For example, Dallas and Houston, they're being proposed to escalate into severe non-attainment status based on the 2008 standard. And this will have a new deadline to meet the standard by July 20th, 2027. And then Dallas, Houston, and San Antonio are being proposed to elevate to moderate non-attainment based on the 2015 standard with the new deadline of August 3rd, 2024. Now, there's a virtual public hearing on May 9th. And again, if the community is interested in being involved, you're more than welcome to. They're accepting pre-registration for both speakers and attendees through May 5th. So if you want more information on that, again, you can just contact me and I'll forward that along to you. Now, I did just want to show some quick ozone trends throughout the tribal monitoring stations. There's currently only a handful of monitoring stations that are operating. Several have been shut down over the years. Now, these are all situated in Oklahoma. And as you can see, they are all well below the NAAQS. So we really have no concerns. The preliminary design values for 2019 to 2021 range from 57 to 61 ppb. And I wanted to also talk a little about the Ozone Weekly Exceedance Day reports. So I've assumed this role, and every week I'm generating a report with 8-hour ozone high value days and design values. Now, these incorporate the different air quality index AQI categories. And you can kind of see on this image on the right, this is just an example of what this report looks like. I also show the preliminary design values. And I'll be submitting these reports April. They've already started for April, and I'll continue throughout the rest of this year. So if you're interested in receiving these reports, go ahead and send me an email at my email address, apodaca.susanna@epa.gov, and I'll be more than happy to add you onto the mailing list. And that is all that I have for my quick updates.
Thanks, Susie. This is Josh. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Josh Madden. Some of y'all may know me already. I am the PM lead here in Region 6. I handle PM 10 as well as PM 2.5. And also I handle the PM exceptional events for the region. Just a quick in line with what Susie had, we are looking at right now the Clean Air Science Advisory Committee, a revision of the PM 2.5 NAAQS. They're looking at, nothing is set in stone right now, but they're looking at revising both the annual and the 24-hour standards. So probably we're looking at a time frame of around summer for the proposal from CASAC. There may be a final NAAQS rule in the spring of 2023 with a possible final designation ruling in spring of 2025. But these dates are fluid, so bear that in mind. There are draft reports as well as previous meeting comments from CASAC on their CASAC website. It's an EPA website. Really, the only other update for the PM that I have is I don't think that any of the tribal air agencies use them. Maybe a couple of them do. But if anybody has the T640X monitors or T640 monitors, it has been shown that they can be biased a little high. I know that a little high is a relative term, and that could be the difference between meeting attainment and non-attainment if you're close. The agency is aware of this, and we know that these monitors are a little bit high. EPA is working with Teledyne to come up with a solution and a patch to help get them more in line with the regular FRM monitors. I'll keep anybody who wants to be updated, just please let me know. I'll keep y'all on a list to update when we have a working solution. And if any issues come up or if you have any questions for the PM, please shoot me an email. My email is madden.joshua@epa.gov. Does anybody have any PM questions right now? No? All right, Nia, turn it over to you.
Thank you, Josh. Good afternoon, everyone. I just wanted to go ahead and introduce myself, as many of you may not know who I am. My name is Nia Riddick, and I am a somewhat new staff member working here in Region 6 as of August 2021 as a life scientist. I have taken over as pollutant lead for lead and SO2 and will be the point of contact for any question or concerns related to those two pollutants. I'm also working as an additional person on the air toxics team for the region. So looking forward to get to know you all better and be able to answer those questions that come my way. I don't have nearly as much to share in the way of updates as my colleagues, which I suppose isn't bad news. SO2 and lead are two of the smaller networks with less monitors in the region and typically less issues. As far as tribal areas go, currently lead does have 2 monitors in the tribal area, one on 723 East 2nd Street and the other on 713 West A Street. Both of these areas have been continuously well under the standard, which is 15 parts per billion, and that's taken as a 3-month rolling average. And the trends have been reflecting no concerns in this area, with essentially no changes in the last 5 years. And that's pretty much it as far as the trends go. If you do have any knowledge of lead sources or are notified of a news source, please do let us know. And I think if you all have any questions for us regarding any of the pollutants, we're open to take those. If not, we can move on to the next person. Thank you.
Okay, are there any questions for the ambient air pollutant updates that we had this afternoon? Okay, well, it doesn't sound like there are. Thank you all for presenting this afternoon. And if we get questions later on, we'll surely forward them to you. And if you guys can still put your questions in the chat box through the whole presentation if you think of something. Okay. Our next speaker is going to be on air permit updates, and it's going to be Erica Ledoux from Region 6.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we
Yes.
can.
Okay, great. I'm going to try and share my screen here. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, awesome. Okay, good afternoon. My name is Erica Ledoux, and I'm an environmental engineer who is the current air permits tribal coordinator in the Office of Air and Radiation. I originally introduced myself last year for the first time after my reassignment. I had spent several years as the New Mexico and City of Albuquerque, Bernalillo County Air Permit State Coordinator. As you may remember, my reassignment was due to Bonnie Berganza's well-deserved retirement. She held this post for quite a few years. I had no delusions then and still don't that I would be able to fill her shoes adequately. However, it has been very busy this past year, so I've not had any opportunity to even worry about that. So I've been working closely with the other Region 6 state air permitting coordinators and tribal coordinators nationally. I have attended many meetings and training with the tribal nations to listen and to learn the concerns of the tribal nations here in Region 6 and nationally. I've also worked with individual tribal nations in Region 6 on specific air permitting actions and on questions and concerns. Also, some tribal nation environmental folks have reached out just to introduce themselves, which I really appreciate, and to communicate historical air permitting information for them.
Erica, we can't hear you. Or have you muted yourself? I think Erica must have lost her connection. Let me see. I think she dropped off. If you want to, let's give her a minute to see if she can connect back with us. I think Erica must be having some technical issues. It shows that she has dropped off. So,
Karen,
Sean, do you want to
let's go ahead and
let?
start the next session. What do you think?
Yeah. Francis, do you want to go ahead and do yours, and then when Erica jumps back on, we'll just let her present after you.
That works for me. That'll be fine.
Okay.
Let me see if I can share my screen over hers.
Yeah, since she's, let me see if I can stop sharing her screen.
Oh.
Francis, there, okay, it lets you. Good deal.
Okay.
We can see your screen.
All righty. Okay.
And I wanted to say thank you, Francis, for doing 2 sessions today. That's mighty nice of
Well-
you. You get the gold star from the Tribal Environmental Summit. Thank you.
You're most welcome. And actually, normally Anjane Gautreau would have had part of this section, but she is actually at the National Tribal Air Quality Forum today, up in Tulsa. So she had planned on trying to do both, but she's speaking at this exact moment, I understand, up there. So she couldn't do both. She asked me to do this one. I wanted to take a couple of minutes here and talk a little bit about climate adaptation. Several years ago, as part of the grants, we asked the tribes to think about all the activities that you already do to protect Mother Earth, to protect the environment, and to actually take credit for those things that you do. And then we said, no, let's not do that. Well, we're back around to doing that. We really understand how much the natural environment means to each of you, and we want to have you tell us about what you do. And that is part of what climate adaptation is, and how each of you can contribute to making a difference in the way that we live in our environment. And so we just wanted to provide a little bit of background. Let me see if I can get full slide. Sorry. There we go. Just a second. Let's see if I can get off of my full screen. Presentation go. Lost presentation. There we go. Okay. Sorry about that. technical difficulties here. Okay, but we have made it a priority to provide assistance to the tribes for climate adaptation activities, such as financial assistance to fund education of tribal members on impacts from climate change, and to define the characteristics needed to develop a community's climate adaptation plan. And what this means is we have some technical expertise here at the region that we would like to offer to the tribes to help them take action to anticipate, prepare for, adapt to, or recover from the impacts of climate change. As we go through the years now, we have seen the extremes of weather, whether it is tremendous flooding, high winds and tornadoes, hurricanes, wildfires. All of these are influenced by our changing climate. And we feel that there are actions that can be taken to help to mitigate some of the impacts, but also help that we can take to adapt our practices that would help mitigate these climate changes. So we do have technical staff here that are available to help tribal employees understand the climate adaptation tools and resources that EPA has, and to provide the technical assistance on developing a climate adaptation plan. These work plans for climate adaptation, these activities include, but they're not limited to, because you can use your own imagination and you have ideas that really are useful and work well. But we'd like to provide just different activities, including the development of an education plan on impacts of climate change, defining the characteristics of a climate adaptation plan. What goes into the plan? What should the plan look like? Help you develop your draft plan. So actually, not only do you need to know what the outline is, you need to know what to put in the outline. So we can help you with some of that. Identify the potential impacts of climate change. How is climate change impacting you, your family, your tribe, your neighbors? How is that all impacting? What are those impacts? What's the vulnerability? If climate change is impacting you, how has it made you vulnerable? What kind of changes do you need to think about? Planning efforts to combat climate change, as well as to think about adaptation strategies. Applying for additional funding. Can you get additional funds to help you put together a climate adaptation plan? What about if you make a significant change in your actions that allow you to move forward with everything? I'm sorry, adaptation measures. Am I still on? I think I just closed out my program. Oh, there we go. Okay, so here are some resources on climate adaptation. Our website is at epa.gov/ARC-X, and that stands for EPA's Adaptation Resource Center. This is an interactive resource to help governments effectively deliver services to their communities as the climate changes. Decision makers can create an integrated package of information tailored specifically to the needs of the tribes. In addition, our users will go through and select areas of interest. Once they've selected their areas of interest, they can go through and find information about the risks posed by climate change associated with those issues of concern. Relevant adaptation strategies. What's going to work for that particular situation? and case studies illustrating how other communities have successfully adapted to those risks and tools to replicate their successes. Finally, EPA's funding opportunity. Okay, I have a pop-up asking for an annotation request. Not sure what that means. I'm in annotation mode, maybe? I'm not sure. Sorry. Other resources on climate adaptation. Other topics include climate change implications. How will the climate implicate your activities? How does it impact you? Adaptation strategies. If it's impacting you, what can you do to lessen that impact, to mitigate it somehow? There are case studies. We have EPA tools online. There's training, online training resources out there. So there are different tutorials and webinars that provide a great deal of information about things that can be done now that will help stop the climate change. Federal funding opportunities. There's a library there of different resource materials that are related, but they may not be specific to climate adaptation. And finally, there's a link for EPA contacts and state websites. EPA may also provide technical assistance to help communities anticipate, plan, and prepare for the changing climate. We have several different technical assistance opportunities. For example, Smart Growth Technical Assistance Programs. These are programs that help communities learn about and implement smart growth approaches. And some of these can be used to adapt to a changing climate. We also have tools and resources for sustainable communities. And there's definitions of what is a sustainable community. How does a community, what makes a community sustainable? That's out there. So that helps to provide you with this information. And EPA is providing all of this out on the website. How do you build a sustainable community? So it's talking about those tools that will allow you to deliver quick and targeted assistance to implement smart growth. And then there's also a college and underserved community partnership program, which will provide technical assistance to small underserved communities, working with local colleges and universities to develop and understand, to help understand climate change adaptation and help develop sustainable communities. And that's at no cost to the small underserved community. Also, EPA has limited abilities in our scope of our statutes, but we do have other statutes in place that help with climate change actions, such as our air quality regulations. And with indoor air quality and climate change adaptation, we can increase knowledge about how to control indoor air contaminants such as fungi and mold. Also, we look at those things for the outdoor air that can cause ground level ozone and particulate matter increases. And then also, what can we do to start reducing those increases? You know, for particulate matter, on a dry day, you know, don't go out and till a lot. don't disturb that top layer of soil if you're in a denuded area. Think about if you have to drive on the pavement or drive on the dirt road on a very dry day, which is going to kick up the dust more and get it into the air where it can be breathed by nearby residents. Just thinking about little things. And Carolina Ron Lee is here at Region 6. She's in our air program, and she's our Air and Radiation Division contact for technical assistance on climate change adaptations. And then I'm in the air program. I'm actually the chief for the ambient air monitoring and grant section here in the Air and Radiation Division at Region 6. And both of us, you can call either one of us for information regarding climate change adaptations. In addition, for the air program grants, Anjanae Gautreaux, most of you know her for her grant work and all. She is reaching out. She's working with Carolina quite a bit to see if there are programs that you can include in your grant work plan that would be applicable to this and that you can take credit for now, which is really good because some of the activities that you're doing, you can take credit for climate adaptation also. So we just are trying to get all of that done. So that's what I've got right now. Stop sharing. Also, just real quick, I wanted to give just a 2-minute update. Do we have Erica back? Erica's back. I want to give just a 2-minute update on the grants program. Anjanae is working on the grant applications that we've received this year for our tribal program. She will be getting letters out to the different tribes that submitted applications. She is working on getting that done by the middle of May. So you should have your notice letter. And then we're asking that you submit your applications into the system. This is your work plan and all your financial forms. You can get that submitted by June 18th. So she'll put that in a letter, but I just wanted to let you know she is working through those. And she's expecting to get the letters out shortly. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you, Fran. We appreciate you, like Sean said, presenting twice today, and for Anjanae. Thank you so much for joining us. And I believe Erica was able to rejoin us. She had some technical issues. So Erica, if you're ready, you can go ahead and start your presentation.
Aaron, I don't know what happened, and to everyone, I don't know what happened. And so I make no promises that it won't happen again. It's a little disturbing. So I'm gonna hurry up and get through it. I just want to say my contact information was on the previous slide. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Teams, WebEx, those platforms make it so easy for us to share and collaborate on projects and to answer questions. So don't hesitate to reach out. My email address is on the slide. So I thought
Erica, you're not showing any slides right now.
I'm not?
Nope,
okay.
Sorry.
Okay. Hey, thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, let's see. How about now?
Much better.
All right, awesome. Okay. All right. So in addition to providing an update on the permits in EPA Region 6, the permitting activities that are taking place now, I thought I'd offer a little overview of NSR Tribal, especially for new people. So back in 2011, EPA promulgated the Tribal NSR rules, which is a federal implementation plan, a FIP. Under this authority provided by the Clean Air Act, the FIP includes 2 new source review NSR rules for the protection of air resources on tribal lands. The first set of rules applies to new and modified minor stationary sources, your minor sources, and to minor mods at existing major stationary sources, the major sources throughout Indian country. And the second set of rules apply to non-attainment major NSR. And this applies to new and modified major sources in areas of Indian country that are designated as not attaining the NAAQS. Currently, EPA directly implements these rules on tribal lands within EPA Region 6, which includes pueblos and tribally owned trust lands. And I thought I'd include here, this is a snippet of the CFR, the electronic CFRs, and to just show you the framework of what I was talking about, the first set of rules and the second set of rules. The first set of rules are here, the Federal Minor NSR Review Program in Indian country, and that mainly is between 49-151 to 49-165. And then for non-attainment major new source review program, it's 49-166 through 173. So this is where we go whenever we have a source that needs permitting on tribal lands, and within the minor source program, we do have 158 for synthetic minor source permits. So remember that, synthetic minor source permits, because I'll be talking about that on my next slide. So that's within the minor source program as well. And also what came later, I think back in 2016, is the FIP, which is up here, begins at 49-101, is the FIP for true minor oil and gas sources. And these are true minor below Title V and PSD threshold limits according to Part 71 and Part 52. It's based on PTE, the source is PTE. This is a registration, and unlike a site-specific program permits, it's a registration. Either the source meets the category or the criteria, or it doesn't. And this registration can't be customized, and you can't establish practically enforceable limits within this registration. So when you hear, I guess, me talk about, if you call me, or if you hear anybody talk about Part 49, this is what it is. Part 49 or NSR tribal rules. This is the framework of the rules. This is where you go if you have any questions. The tribal minor NSR program defines a minor source as a facility that emits or has the potential to emit the PTE NSR pollutants above the tribal minor source permitting thresholds, but below major source thresholds. So if you have a facility whose PTE, if you have a source that you've calculated the PTE for, and it's above the tribal minor source permitting thresholds, but below, it may apply to the NSR. That source may be applicable to the NSR tribal rules. PTE is defined as the maximum capacity of the stationary source to emit a pollutant under its physical and operational design. PTE is meant to be the worst case emission calculations. The actual emissions from the source may be much lower. The mechanisms that we have within the NSR tribal rules for permitting are site-specific permits. It's a case-by-case determination of the source's emission limits, as well as any control technology requirements. General permits, these are permits that have been developed for a number of similar equipment types or facilities, and it's used to simplify the permit issuance process for these facilities. And then I talked about the synthetic miner. I showed you before where it's embedded within the NSR rules, synthetic miner. We have the option for facilities to apply for a synthetic miner. And this applies to facilities that have the PTE in amounts that are at or above a major source threshold, but has voluntarily accepted emission limits so that the potential emissions are below those thresholds. And you'll find that at 40 CFR 4958. Here's a snippet of the general permits that I was talking about that a source could be applicable to, and these are the ones that we have on tribal lands. This is a listing of the ones that are available. General permits and permits by rule. The threshold limits that I was talking about earlier, the NSR minor, the minor NSR threshold limits, this is what I was taught. This is in part 49.153. And just make note that a source that is in non-attainment has lower NSR threshold limits than a source that's in attainment, that's in an attainment area. But this is your litmus test, I guess, your so to speak. This is what your measuring stick when you calculate the PTE for your source. This is what you compare it to see if your source applies to NSR tribal rules. And if it's above this, then your source may need a permit. Okay, this is, I guess, it's a summary table of what we have going on now in Region 6 as far as permitting on tribal lands. Since the last summit in 2021, we issued the following. I think the ones that were issued in 2021 were issued right after the summit. It was a synthetic miner. NSR permit issued for Choctaw Defense Manufacturing on May 14, 2021. Also, a Part 71 Title V permit renewal was issued for Transwestern Pipeline Company, Laguna Compressor Station number 6 on May 25th, 2021. And this is a natural gas compression and transmission facility. Right now, we have going on in Region 6, we have the Pueblo of Sandia Resort and Casino submitted an application for modification for their synthetic miner NSR permit. This application was found complete on June 25th of 2021, and EPA is starting the 30-day public comment period for this permit modification tomorrow, May 4th. And this will run through June 3rd. EPA is targeting to issue this permit mod by mid-June. Also, Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma Pocola Casino and Resort has submitted an application for an administrative amendment to its facility's existing minor source permit. So the original permit was issued last year on March 25th, 2021, and this amendment application was submitted in October, and it was deemed complete in November. And this permit action will not require a public comment period due to the fact that it's a minor change. And the target for completion on this is end of May, issuance of this administrative amendment. We have 2 Part 71 renewal applications in-house for E&H receiver and Los Musteños compressor station. These are both Harvest Four Corner facilities. Both submitted their applications end of last year, early this year, and both applications were found incomplete. And we're working with the applicant in getting supplemental information so that we can begin drafting those permits. That completes my presentation. If you have any questions. Also, I guess I forgot to mention the Sandia Resort Casino, the administrative record. At the bottom there, at the bottom of the table, that's the docket number. EPA R06 OAR 2022-0316 for submitting comments. And that's at regulation.gov. I hope I didn't get disconnected during this. I'm going to go ahead and unshare my screen.
Okay, well, if there aren't any questions for Erica, we'll go ahead and wrap up this session. Sometimes, meeting in person is for a reason, and the electronic world is great, but when things like this happen, just makes you want to meet in person more often. I think that when Frances came on, she kind of had a little overview of what Anjane was going to talk about anyway. So as far as I know, Anjane is not going to be speaking this afternoon on that last session that we had for this afternoon. So that's probably going to be it for this afternoon session. Unless,
Sean?
Yes.
Excuse me, this is Fran. It looks like Anjane has joined us.
Oh, she has. Great.
Yeah, I just tried to unmute myself. I'm sorry.
Okay, well, great, Anjane. I'm glad you're there because I didn't want to have to say your last name and butcher it. So everybody knows who you are. So go right ahead.
Okay, I really wasn't sure if I was going to make this presentation, but so I really didn't pull together some slides, but I actually have something that I may be able to share that you might be interested in. Let's see. Trying to share. Oh, this is it. Is it not? Oh. My buttons are sticking today. Okay. Can you guys see it okay?
It's starting to share.
Okay. Second.
Now we can see it.
Okay, let me see if I can move all of these things out of the way. Yes.
Anjanae, we can't hear you. It shows you're still connected.
I think I'm back. Can you guys?
Okay, yeah, now we can hear you.
Okay. I don't know. Am I sharing my screen now?
Yes, it's showing your drop down boxes stuff. I don't know if there's just a lag maybe.
Okay. Hmm. Try to push share again. If I share the whiteboard, will that share everything?
Why don't you stop sharing your screen and then try to share again, and just try to share your screen and just click on the PowerPoint, and then you have to hit share again. Try that. Try to stop sharing and then re-share.
Okay, let me see. I'm thinking. It doesn't have a stop sharing. That's why I'm afraid if I push this red X, I'm gonna cut
At the
myself.
top of your screen, if you'll hover at the top of your screen, there should be a drop down box. See if that works. If not, I'll try to stop sharing for you.
It moved around. I don't see it hovering anywhere because I do recall seeing it the first time.
I'll try to stop sharing on my.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, I think that did it.
Yeah, I think you stopped sharing your screen.
Okay, try this again. Share.
Yes. Hit the share button and then click on your PowerPoint, and then I think you have to hit share again.
Okay, how's that working?
Perfect.
Okay, now I'm going to try to
You can
move.
sit now.
Okay, I'm trying to move this out the way so you guys can see better. I think I was moving too fast, clicking too many buttons, and it wasn't keeping up. Did I do slideshow from the beginning? Here we go. Okay, I just want to give you a couple of updates on what happened with our grant funding. By now, everyone should have received an email from me letting you know that you're being funded because we had enough money to fund everyone that submitted a work plan. And it may not be everything that you asked to be submitted. We still may have some negotiations to do, but we were lucky this year and the money just worked out. That being said, we received 12 proposals altogether. And this is kind of how it broke down. 7 of them came in for 103 projects, a couple for air monitoring, about 4 for what I consider to be air monitoring preparation. And that might be you're leaning towards monitoring. You're just trying to understand what you may need to monitor for using the emissions inventory you may have just conducted, things like that. And we have like one person who's kind of getting ready to do a emissions inventory preparation. So more of a capacity building grant, but they're moving, forward with an emissions inventory. So that's good. For the 105, we have 5 program grants is what I'll say. So they break down, 3 of them want to remain under 105 right now. And we have 2 of them who have actually put these activities under PPGs. So a reminder, if I am working with you for a 105 grant, or if in the future you ever want to do a 105 grant, at least right now, there's a match waiver for tribes conducting activities under a PPG. So that's something to consider for, at least the near future. Well, let me stop here. As far as me saying when things are air monitoring or, stuff like that, it's just kind of giving a kind of an overall tangible product deliverable is what, this particular grant maintains, but they all have some level of training. You're going to ITEP and taking trainings, or you're coordinating with the NTAA and, participating in conferences in NTFAQ. So all of that is kind of inherently comes with, your budget. So we take that into account. So when you just see me talking about air monitoring, emissions inventory, I recognize that's not the only thing that you guys are doing. and I do elevate that to management. So when we get down to the money, this is how we get to that point. And I hadn't had a chance to touch base with my supervisor on some of this, so I hope she is okay. Well, let me stop here. Does anybody have any general questions before I move into the money? Okay, not hearing anything. I'm going to move forward. I broke it down like this just so you guys could get an understanding of what I'm seeing and what I'm dealing with from a funding level. A lot of times you hear that we talk about, you know, Region 6's allocation is. That's this 1.241 number here. So generally we get about a million to $1.2 million a year. And it's been like that for, you know, about a decade. I've been here 20 years now, but give or take, it's kind of been like that for a decade, kind of consistently stagnant. That being said, whenever you see reports that ask us, you know, what's our allocation, that may not be the only money that we're working with. So that being said, because of coming off of the pandemic and a lot of people, you know, couldn't travel and, you know, some people lost staff or priorities changed, you know, we ended up with a little bit more money coming back to us. So I'm just going to start at the top and explain how this breaks down just so you can understand what's happening. Last year, when we got our balance, our allocation, after we made all the awards that we, you know, could possibly make, sometimes you guys have changes where like maybe the indirect cost changes, rate changes. So we haven't quite awarded the grant yet. So, you know, you make a revision to your budget and it kind of brings your ceiling down a little bit, your request down. And so sometimes we end up with a little bit of money left over. Last year, we just ended up with about $3,900, $3,908 to be exact. So we roughly, you know, have been making sure we zero it out so that we make sure we utilize all the money that's given to us and, you know, or comes back to us for you guys. So we, you know, and of that money, I actually had one tribe that I was working with that we needed to incrementally fund them. So this money, this 81,000 here is really already spoken for. We just had to get them in a place to be able to get that money on their grant. So all of the reason I brought that up and is because sometimes we have pots of money, and unless you understand what's happening in that pot of money, it may already be spoken for. So some of you may have had incremental grants funded in, you know, from GAP or somewhere, you know, water or somewhere else. So it's pretty much spoken for, but I still take into account that it falls into my allocation for this year, you know, my overall allocation to fund this year. And because of the pandemic, we had a lot of, you know, like we said, travel issues and office closures, a lot of things happen. And for that reason, over time, we were, some grants needed to close out. Maybe we hit the 5-year mark or the tribe has completed the project. They just happen to have money left over. That's how we got this $78,000 figure here. So money that someone closed out a grant and it came back to us. Before we let it go to headquarters, I work with my budget person to try to make sure that we can use it here in the region and just redistribute it or re-award it, you know, as kind of a FY22 money or new money, so to speak, in order to make sure you guys get the bang for the buck that, you know, we asked for in our allocation from previous years. So with all of these kind of things from previous years coming together with our $1.241 million allocation, I actually had a total of a little bit over $1.4 million to work with. Now we still have, you know, the 12 tribes. I had another sheet, but I really can't pull that up because it has some explicit information on there. But in our request, we basically got 1.330 after negotiating certain things, you know, that may or may not have been allowable in their particular grant or appropriate. So this year was one of those special years where we actually had more money than the requests that came into us. But working with you guys as closely as I do, I actually have been in contact with a few tribes, you know, here and there, so I know what's going to happen. So as long as you guys remain in touch with me, then I might be able to, quote unquote, put you on a waiting list. So if money does become available, you hear me say that all the time, like, you know, hey, put a proposal in, because if money comes, you know, if money becomes available from whatever means, coming back from other grants, then at least you have the opportunity to be funded. So I do have like one tribe on that waiting list who, depending on some of the negotiations of these, may end up with a grant this year. So I appreciate everyone who has paid attention to their, expenses. Do you need it or don't you need it? Because it's a great opportunity to recycle it back into the fold, when your grant closes, or if you don't need it anymore, then when you submit a new grant request, then maybe you just ask for that much less if we're going to do an amendment. So keep those kinds of things in mind, that we always want to try our best to utilize every bit of dollar that we can. And this is the part where I hope my supervisor is okay with me sharing this. I was kind of, had some time on my hands, and as I was preparing for the NTFAQ that I'm here for now, and as I was looking over all of the documents I had, I found like a 10-year somewhat of assessment of how everything I just explained to you about how we work with our money and making sure that we get it out to you guys. And I kind of just jotted this stuff down so that you could kind of get an idea of how much money we've been able to have over the past at least like 9-10 years, and how we recycle that money in. So I just put these in here because I happen to have the paperwork to guess, generally speaking, in each of these fiscal years, we got this much in requests from tribes. Maybe you just submitted a proposal, or prior to that, an application, and you just, before we negotiated, this is what was asked for. So that's what this first column is for. And this Region 6 allocation is exactly that. This is the amount of money that headquarters deemed on paper was our allocation for that particular year. And if you look over here, this breaks down, you got to look at it from the year before. So like at FY13, we were able to use an extra $12,587 that came from grants that closed out from FY21. So on September 30th of each year, we have a lot of grants that may close out. A lot of people may do amendments, but sometimes we have grants that close out. If for some reason you're not able to spend that money, sometimes we have an opportunity to keep it in the region. So this middle column here is how much money has been recycled back into our allocation for the next year. So if you look down here, you basically see that about $222,000, give or take, is how much we've made sure to keep in our region, as opposed, to, since it was part of our initial allocations, to keep these in our region so that you guys can continue to work, and do everything you need to do without any interference or any stopgaps, so to speak. So I haven't completed this year just because we've just now sent out our proposal responses, email responses. But generally speaking, we've had over the years well over $10 million, $10.4 million that we have been able to award to tribes for Clean Air Act grants. And this includes 103 and 105 grants, because our money comes in one pot. And we just kind of got to work with you guys every year. That's why we have our proposals come in, because before you submit an application, we don't want you to go through all that trouble and then go back and have to revise all kind of stuff. So we get the work plan and the budget narrative so that we can try to work out everything, so that when you submit your application, there's, we still have issues sometimes that we have to go back and do revisions, but it's very minimal. But that being said, with all of the money that we've been able to award, I will finally, get to award someone. I always tell people submit it, and I think I may actually have enough money to submit that person. So if you look over here on our unobligated balances, as you can see, we have done our best to keep the money flowing back to you, as opposed to going to headquarters or anywhere else. And like I said, this money is pretty much spent. So I should be able to zero this out for the future. And I just wanted to give you guys an idea, let's see if I can get out of here, an idea of what we've been able to accomplish. I'm sorry, there we go. Stop sharing. And I'll see if I'm allowed to share, those with you. Like I said, I just pulled them together because I just wanted to give you guys an idea. For like the past decade, you guys have been working hard to establish, programs, and in some instances, just, conduct projects to kind of get certain concerns addressed. And I just wanted you to see that we're working hard to get as much money in this region as possible, and to continue to, fund you at the rate that you need. But I also appreciate those of you who have realized that You know, sometimes you may ask for one thing, but as time goes on and you realize, you know what, I actually don't need as much this year, and you don't request as much, because that leaves an opportunity for someone else to come in and possibly get a new grant who may not have been able to be approved for a grant before. So I said all that to say, don't be discouraged. And yes, it's more work on me, but if you have a proposal, submit it and we'll work out the kinks, you know, with the money later. I never want anybody to be discouraged and not submit a proposal. And I also want you to know that if you don't get funded for a proposal this year, and that's something that you do want to do, submit the same proposal next year, because you never know what's going to happen with the money. Sometimes we'll pop up with extra money. So I just encourage you to talk to me. Everyone, I don't even have my information on here, but I can get you my contact information. A lot of you already know how to get in touch with me, but if you want to brainstorm or, you know, discuss anything, I'm always open to you guys. And just want to help you out. But let me stop there, because like I said, I didn't even know I was going to speak today. So are there any questions before we get out of you guys' hair?
Just so you know, Anjanae, I did give them your phone number.
Oh,
earlier.
great. Thank you. Thank you. Well, if we have no questions, then, you know, guys, feel free to, you know, like I said, give me a call anytime. I am purely a money person. I know how the money works, but if you have any technical questions, I can always get in touch with my technical staff, not my technical staff, but our technical people who can help you further. And if they can't answer your questions, we can find out the appropriate person, maybe in headquarters, you know, someone's up there that you need to be talking to. So don't hesitate to call.
Okay, thank you, Anjanae.
Thank you.
Always nice to have the money person on last. It always kind of wraps up the day, I think. We're going to go ahead and break now for the day. If there's not any more questions from anybody, we're going to have the sessions will start again on Thursday at 9 a.m. With the Attains panel discussion. So if there's not any more questions, thank you all for attending this afternoon, and we will see you on Thursday at 9 a.m. Take care.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.